This is one of the scariest stories I've read in a while. It's another creepy wife story, and you know how much we love creepy wives around here. So there's a guy, married to his wife for 6-7 years, met in college, love of his life. Always is, love of his life. This guy's quite a scaredy cat, you know, scared of monsters under his bed, doesn't like watching horror movies, and he sees his wife as quite a protector. She's the one that tucks him in at night, you know. His wife's called Natalie, and she is his entire world. With her, he is complete. He says that she's got beautiful, long, dark hair and the most beautiful green eyes. And he just says that anytime he looks into her eyes, he feels warm, he feels protected, and is reminded of how much he loves her. Everything's just fine and dandy until one night he gets up in the middle of the night. He's really hot. He wants to go and get a drink. He uses his flashlight because he's a scaredy cat. He's scared of the dark. This guy must be 5 years old or something. And he notices his wife isn't in bed with him. When he walks out into the hallway, he sees the light coming from the bathroom and he hears a tap running and he thinks she's in the bathroom. He goes downstairs and he's a bit startled because he sees his wife standing at the sink just running a glass of water. He's only startled for less than a second and he says, "Oh, I thought you were in the bathroom, you've left the tap on." And she just looks at him and smiles. He gets a drink, says, "I'm really hot," goes back upstairs to bed. However, when he goes back upstairs to bed, his wife is already in bed. He's really confused and he says, "How have you got up here faster than me?" And she just says, "I don't know what you're on about. Like, you're just tired. Go to bed." And he thinks, yeah, maybe I am tired. Goes to bed. A little while passes, maybe a few days, and his wife wakes him up one morning around 10 a.m. and says, "I'm just going to pop out to the shop, run some errands. Why don't we go out when I'm back?" And he says, yep. He thinks, "I'm going to have a lie-in," stays in bed. He wakes up around 11:30, goes downstairs, and his wife is at the sink again. And he says to her, "I thought you'd be back a little bit later. Like, what's the plans for today?" And she just looks at him and smiles. And at that moment, the doorbell rings. When he gets to the door, at first he doesn't see anyone, and then he notices his wife's car in the driveway. The boot is open, and he hears her shout, "Help me with these bags, will you?" This guy nearly collapses to the floor. His wife runs over to him, and she knows something's wrong. He says, "How are you just in the kitchen, and how are you on the driveway?" This is when his wife tells him, "Honey, sit down. There's something we need to talk about." What possibly could we need to talk about at this moment? She sits him down and says, "This is something that's happened all my life. People have seen two of me, where I've been in two places at once." She says it happened as a child. It happened a lot around her family, her siblings, and even some friends. It was never anything bad. It was always just her, and they referred her to the entity that was just there. She explained that she thought things had died down as she got older because it hadn't happened in a really, really long time. She says to him, "You've just got to ignore it. It's quite a peaceful presence. It's never spoken to anybody. It's never harmed anybody. It's just there, kind of like a shadow or a mirror reflection." But she does say that they've never, ever overlapped. She's never heard it speak before, and they've never been in the same room at the same time. It's just somebody's in two places at once. Kind of like the Emily Sage story. I have spoken about that in the past, where in the 1870s there was a woman who was a teacher in Latvia that was in two places at the same time. Like, doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, somehow this guy starts to live with his wife's entity. As I said at the beginning, he sees his wife as his protector. So in a way, it was kind of like an angel of his wife was just in the house. She was always either by the sink in the kitchen or sometimes just in the hallway. She was never fully facing anybody. She always had kind of her back towards them, and you could just see the side profile of her face. Never spoke, never caused any harm. And he learned to live and like this entity, which is kind of weird. Maybe bro like two wives. Anyway, months pass, and again, everything was just fine and dandy. Until, again, one morning, his wife says to him, "I'm going to go up to my grandma's for dinner. Do you want to come with me?" And he says, "No, it's Sunday. I've got work tomorrow. I just want to chill out, play some Xbox." Like I said, bro's a teenager. She says, "Okay, I'll see you later on." He comes downstairs and he sees his wife's entity by the sink, and he just looks over at her. She smiles at him. He smiles at her. She's kind of got like a glass in her hand, which wasn't unusual either. And then his phone rings. So he picks up his phone, and on the other end is his wife. His wife speaks to him and says, "Hi, I'm going to be setting off in about an hour. And that's when he hears a smash, and also his wife on the phone can hear the smash as well. He looks over to his wife's entity, and that's when he shits his pants. His wife's entity now is facing directly towards him. Her head's to the side, always is. And he says her beautiful green eyes are no longer green, they're black, and her mouth is open. Nah. He's on the phone just like not saying any words, just looking at this demon of a wife in front of him. And his wife saying, "What's wrong, honey? What's wrong? Honey, what's happened?" And he says, and she knows. She knows. She says, "Is she in the same room as you?" He just replies, "Yes." She says, "Is she looking at you?" He replies, "Yes." And that's when then she just screams at him, "Turn away and get out of the house now. I'm on my way home." He leaves his house and he waits for his wife. I'm going to have to pull a part 2, guys. That's how the story ends. I haven't read part 2 yet. What do you think's going on? Do you think people could be in 2 places at the same time? There is a story about a woman called Emily Sargé that's allegedly true. Happened in the 1870s about a teacher who was in 2 places at the same time. What do you think's going on? Okay, I'm back with part 2 of the creepy wife story. You're going to have to deal with how I look right now. I have a 6-week-old baby. I've just had to read the story while I take a bath. So where we left off, the guy saw his demon wife entity while he was on the phone to his real wife. There was an overlap. As originally the wife said, there was never an overlap. This thing never appeared while his wife was in the same room or on the phone. When his wife comes home, she runs up to him, starts crying and says, "I'm so sorry, you don't deserve this." She goes into the house. The husband's a bit apprehensive, you know, there's like a demon version of you in the house. And she says, "Don't worry, she won't appear while I'm here." They go inside the house and the wife just keeps on saying, "You don't deserve this. I never thought anything like this would happen again." Now her husband's just like, "What do you mean again? Like, what's going on?" So originally, when his wife said, "Oh, she doesn't do anything bad," that bitch was lying. So her husband just says, like, "What can we do about this? Like, this isn't normal. Like, have you been to church? Have you been to see a witch? Have you, like, who have you spoke to? Like, because who do we need to call about this?" That's when his wife says again that when she was a child and when her family and siblings were seeing this other Natalie, it took them a while to tell other members of their family because this other Natalie would only ever appear in her own house. On one occasion, another family member, like an auntie or a cousin, was around the house and saw the other Natalie, was obviously shocked. However, when they spoke about it as a family, they realised that Natalie wasn't the first person this had happened to, and it actually happened to one of their great-grandmas. So I'm just confused as to what's going on here. Like, is this a ghost? Is this a doppelganger? Is it some timey-wimey bullshit? Like, I don't understand what's going on here, and it's very confusing. Part 2's always pissed me off. Anyway, after Natalie and her husband are debriefing about all of this, they decide that maybe they should go and see Natalie's family, go see this cousin that knew about this happening to other family members, just to see what it could be, how to get rid of it, the history of it in the family. So they make a plan to go the following day. That day they wake up and they've slept through alarm. It's nearly like 12 p.m. in the afternoon. He wakes up, he goes downstairs and he sees his wife having a glass of orange juice. And at first he's like shitting himself, and she just turns and says, "Don't worry, it's me." And he says, "Look, just don't be like lurking like she does. She's always like near the sink or with a glass in her hand." They have breakfast, but they both say that they're far too nervous to eat, and they get in the car. It's about a half an hour, 45-minute drive to this family member's house. On the way there, they're just talking. They're just being husband and wife. They're just chilling. It's fine. When they pull up to this family member's driveway, they actually live in the house where this original family doppelganger entity thing was. They noticed that the house was looking quite unkept. There was a car in the driveway that looked like it never moved. And that's when he looks at his wife and says, "Are you sure this is the right address? It looks like no one's lived here for years." And she looks at him and says, "Yeah, this is the right address. Let's go inside." They both get out the car. They're walking towards the house. That's when he hears his phone ringing from a distance, but he's left it in the car. He goes, "Oh, let me just go and grab my phone." And his wife says, "No, just leave it in the car." And he says, "No, what if it's important? You know, it was work. We just kind of left last minute. I need to take the call." And she's adamant, "Don't take that phone call." He notices that her eyes are like getting quite angry now, and he's thinking, why is she acting like this? He goes to the car, he gets his phone, and he sees Natalie written on the phone screen. Without even looking at the woman standing by this house, he gets in the car, he puts on the seatbelt, he answers the phone, and hears his wife hysterical. She's saying, "I'm in the basement. I'm locked in the basement. Where are you?" He backs out the driveway as fast as he could, and he looks up and he sees that face of this woman that's pretending to be his wife just staring at him. He describes it as her eyes widened black and her mouth and her jaw are just like swaying. I know you guys like it when I do the impressions, but I fear that looking like how I am is going to give you nightmares. Whatever this thing was, it had somehow evolved from just lurking around the corners, you know, just standing next to the sink, only seeing the side profile, to then drinking orange juice, having breakfast, having conversations and holding this guy's hand. I don't know what we're calling this. Entity, doppelganger, demon, mimic. You guys decide. If you've got any scary stories you want me to tell, let me know them. If you've got a true scary story, DM me. Again, I apologise for how I look. I have a 6-week-old baby. The only me time I get is when I'm in the bath.
My spirit ghost magnet, or I'm starting to think it's me. You know, we've went over the haunted house I grew up in and how that is and how my parents still live in it. And we're currently investigating that. Okay, you guys get that. I already told you guys how I had moved into another house that was built in the 50s. And that one was also haunted, right? Well, almost a year ago, my wife and I moved to this house. This is a new build, bitch. A new build. No one, nada, zero, but us has lived here. Keep in mind, I still sage to this bitch, right? Because I'm big on energy and all of that. Lately, my spidey senses have been tingling and I'm like, nope. I'm just trying not to entertain it, you know, whatever. I've got enough going on trying to investigate my parents' house. But watch this video. I'm home alone right now. And if you guys didn't know this, I do like beauty reviews on a whole separate page, okay? That's like my makeup page. It's my scary story page. Keep them separate. I was doing a tutorial for a bronzer. And the door opened up behind me. Okay, these are new doors. There's no movement of air. When these doors are shut, they're latched. They don't just creak the fuck open like, you know, on an old house or something. Here's the video. Let me know your thoughts. Doing a voiceover so that way you guys don't have to hear me blab about makeup since this is my scary story page. But just pay attention to the door behind me. It's closed the entire freaking video. And then even when it opens, I don't notice it right away. You're going to see it. Oh, look, did you see it? I don't realize it until I pause and go to do another take, right? I don't know, y'all. And the vibes, you know the kind of vibes that they were. Okay, I wish I would have noticed it automatically, but obviously I was paying attention to my face and not the background. And again, I'm completely home alone. So this is wonderful. Let me know your thoughts.
What up, though, cousins? Come sit down. So this woman said that her mom is a frog leg eating, barefoot, wrestling the pigs country, is what she described her family as in my email. She said that the land was left by her grandfather to her mother. Her siblings were angry about it, and ever since then, at every single family meeting, they are fighting to get this land back. So one day she's in the shower, and she says the power goes out. Now, it's not unusual for the power to go out. She said that that's pretty much one of the biggest reasons for the update, is because the power is always going out. They live in the super deep country. She says since it's not unusual for the power to go out, she continued to shower. She didn't even flinch. So while she continued showering, she said she saw someone walk past the shower curtain. It scared her, so she slowly poked her head from out the shower curtain to look to see who the heck that was. So when she looked out, she saw this tall, slender, dark figure standing next to the toilet. And she said that it looked over its shoulder at her and started running backwards. She said she got discombobulated and was terrified. She tried to get away. She fell out the shower because she was trying to get away. She got up after she fell out the shower and she ran to the closest bedroom. The closest bedroom was her grandfather's room before he passed away. So she said that, you know, she locked the door and she felt safe in there, and she just collapsed on the bed trying to put together what was that. She said she just laid there for a minute just because she couldn't believe what she saw. She said when she opened her eyes, the figure was standing over her, over the bed. She was frozen with fear. She just laid there. She didn't know what to do. She said her stomach was in knots. So she just laid there because she didn't know what to do next, because she's like, what do I do if this thing is right here in my face? So she said she just closed her eyes and she was just hoping and wishing that the next time she opened her eyes, it was gone. So when she did open her eyes again, the thing was gone. She said at the next family meeting, she brought it up. She said her cousins, her aunts and uncles were there, and she brought it up. She said all the aunts and uncles looked at one another and dismissed it, continued on about business talk. She said about a week later, she invited her friend over to watch scary movies. They're watching scary movies. She said not even 10 minutes into the scary movie, her friend screamed at the top of her lungs because she said something whispered in her ear, leave. See, why do y'all do this? If something just finished chasing you, scaring the shit out of you, why did you include me? You just wanted me to suffer with you? Like, what the fuck? Fast forward, she said her friend still stayed even after all that madness. Her friend had been helping prior to this, her packing up things, things that they didn't need. So her friend was helping her pack some more things up after they watched that movie. So while they're packing things up, her friend finds this doll. So her friend asked her, hey, can I have this doll? And her friend was just like, actually, no. Like that, I remember that doll. That was my grandmother. Like, that was one of her favorites, So her friend goes, well, what did she used to do with it? And she was too scared to tell her friend voodoo. She sat down and she had a talk with her mother. And she told her mom, she said, Mom, she's like, I've been experiencing some really crazy things. And so her mom asked her, go into detail about what you've been experiencing. And when she went into detail, her mom just straight up told her, she was just like, I'm just going to rip the Band-Aid off. You need to know about it because one day when I'm gone, you're going to want to know this. So she's like, okay, what is it? Her mom told her, okay, Grandma used to perform rituals to keep our family here on the land. So when family died, she said that her mother used to perform rituals so that their spirits can never leave the property. So honestly, there's no telling what that thing was that was running backwards towards you. That could have been one of your aunties, uncles, your granddaddy. You never know. My question is, why they gotta stay? Why they can't go to glory? They just gotta stay there with y'all? That's miserable.
Hello and welcome back to a series of spooky stories, The Haunted Tea Spill. This series is brought to you by all things spooky and ungodly amounts of paranormal activity. Per fucking usual. It's down here if you want it. It's cute and I literally wear it every day. So it's not bullshit, but it's bullshit that I have to put it in here. You know what I mean? Gardening break. Now on to the story. When I was around 10 years old, my friend at the time and my family visited my grandparents in rural Arkansas. Fucking hate that word. The street we lived on had been in the family for decades and we joked that it was a compound. We had a family graveyard and everything dedicated to how many generations had been there. Lots of ghost cousins and ghost aunts and ghost uncles. I don't know how I feel about that. On the street, there was a playground near my grandparents' house. It was a slide, a swing, a sandpit, and a picnic area encased in almost a garage. We opened it up for family reunions, and inside there were some tables and chairs, and that's it. To the front was a large, overgrown field that was rarely mowed, a small house, and a plaque dedicated to the man who used to live there. My friend and I decided that we wanted to play with our dolls there that day. So we ventured through the woods in between my grandparents' land to the playground. Through the fucking woods. Oh, Jesus. Setting the scene. We sat on the concrete between the sandlot and the picnic area and played. The doors to the picnic area were completely closed at that point. We hadn't used them in years. After about 15 minutes, my friend and I heard an aggressive banging coming from inside. We chose to ignore it after it stopped and continued playing. Then the banging continued and we got a bit scared, but this is the boondocks and a lot of animals lived in the area, so I chalked it up to that. What do you mean? You should still be scared. 'Cause what if it's a wild anything? A wild anything. A wild, crazy, rabid animal. No big deal. Forget the fact that this could be a fucking scary-ass demon ghost. You just still sat there and played after you realized that it could be a crazy rabid animal. Survival skills of a fart in the wind. After another 10 minutes passed of silence, the banging got louder and the lights inside started to flash aggressively. My friend and I booked it back through the woods and cried to my dad. So you wouldn't have had to cry to your dad if you would have left the first time you heard the scary banging. And through the fucking woods, this is almost a decade later, now living on that street with my family, I recounted the story to my father. What he didn't tell me as a child but told me later was the man that lived in that house loved the playground and land more than anything and dedicated his life to it. So much so that one day he was burning trash, he had a heart attack and fell into the motherfucker. Fell into the fucking fire. Imagine having a fucking heart attack and falling into a fucking fire. What a double whammy. He burned alive, and my family kept his home up and put the plaque up for him. My dad said that he hated seeing the lawn to the playground get overgrown, and he would work on it daily. I think he was upset that my family continued to use it while letting the grass get so bad. He wanted to teach us a lesson. It spooks me to this day, and even after 13 years, I've never gone back. What the fuck do you mean upset that your family has kept the fucking land and the house and put a fucking plaque up, but the grass got a little overgrown? Listen here, sir. We kept your fucking shit. We put a plaque up in your honor. And you want to be upset with me because I haven't had time to mow the fucking grass? Sorry, Mr. Ghostman. You're just going to have to fucking deal with it. Unless you're going to get your little ghost lawnmower and take care of fucking business. But then again, that could not be what it was. Maybe he was wanting to work on it. And then he got mad that he couldn't work on it. I'm tapped out. I'm so sorry. You know what? What's your theory in the comments? Rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. Put your theory. Who the fuck? Do whatever, you know? If you have a story of your own that you want to submit, you can do so on the link tree in my profile. I will see y'all at the next episode. Stay spooky, friends.
Let's read another scary story that was sent to us. For privacy reasons, I'll put my name as Bond since that's my nickname. I've always been obsessed with horror things, so much so that I've bought an Annabelle doll, Chucky doll, Robert the doll, a Ouija board, etc. I truly believe all of the dolls that come from a movie always have something attached to it. Last October, I bought an Annabelle doll because I already had a lot of other horror movie dolls, and immediately when I took her out of the box, I felt a weird feeling, as if I shouldn't have bought it. Let me just tell you now, I bought it at a garage sale. Later that same night when I went to sleep, I experienced sleep paralysis. I have a chair near my bed, and I saw the Annabelle doll in the lap of a strange figure. It had horns and it was black. I was horrified because who wouldn't be? I prayed super hard in my head, and the figure looked at me, visibly angry, and then I woke up. I couldn't sleep that whole night. You probably would have thought by now that I would have thrown away that doll. But nope, I still kept it. I kept getting sleep paralysis, but it was the same figure every time. One time, I remembered if you move your foot, you could wake up. So that's what I did, and it worked. But unfortunately, later that day when I was about to go down the stairs, I got pushed by something and broke that same ankle I moved in my paralysis. I have a feeling it has to do with the Annabelle doll because nothing has happened until I got her. When we tried to return her to the owner, it was as if the owner never existed. The number showed up as non-existent and the house was abandoned. We asked nearby neighbors if they know the person who lived there, and they said it's been abandoned for over 30 years. I'm not sure who that person was who gave me the doll, but something tells me it was not human. Okay, I know that's like kind of a short story, y'all, but that is so freaking creepy. I personally don't think I've ever owned anything haunted, but let me know if you have. That is freaking insane. And I think I'm gonna look for more stories that have to do with haunted dolls and objects because I am so interested.
People on the internet really like telling me that I am weird and so are my theories. You have no idea. You truly do not know the half of it. For example, a few years ago, I spoke about how limestone and water were both huge conductors of paranormal energy, which is why Florida is so paranormally active, along with its history, of course. But I think the geographical components of Florida contribute to that paranormal energy. I truly thought that that was it, but the more I have thought about it these last few years, water specifically seems to play more of a part than I realized. If you're not from here, Florida is filled with canals and waterways that zigzag all across the state. Like, the state is covered in water. And because of so many waterways in the state, a lot of people who go missing in Florida are eventually found in their cars, submerged in water. My home state heroes are Sunshine State Sonar because they use sonar to find people in their cars who have gone missing years ago and finally give those families closure. But if you think about it, if you were to be driving somewhere, going about your life, and you suddenly crashed into water and didn't have a way to get out, and you were surrounded by this freezing cold water that was suffocating you, and you were desperately just praying somebody would save you, and you weren't saved, thinking about the life that you still desperately wanted to live as that water killed you, don't you think you might come back to maybe haunt that area to try to tell people you were there so that you could eventually be found, so that your family could know what happened to you? Because see, I think a lot of the women in white stories and phantom hitchhiker stories and all of those legends that are all over Florida might be contributed to people who crashed in their cars and weren't found. For example, there were urban legends about Sawgrass Mills Mall when I was growing up, and because I grew up in Broward, I went there regularly with my family. When you enter the mall, you go past this little retention pond thing, and of course nobody ever thought of it. Millions of people have drove by that retention pond, not giving it a second thought. The entire time, a man was submerged in his car in that retention pond, and his family had no idea what happened to him for decades. God only knows how many times me and my family drove by that man's corpse. There were urban legends about people seeing shadows and phantoms in that mall as well as in the parking lot. I cannot help but ask myself if at least one of those sightings were of that man trying desperately to be found. We don't know why certain people become earthbound when they die and others don't. We have no idea if water could contribute to an earthbound spirit. If you drive anywhere in Florida or anywhere with water, but especially Florida, you need to have a window breaker in your car and you need to know exactly what you are going to do in the event that your car goes into water. Because I promise none of those people that it happened to were anticipating it ever happening to them either. You have 30 to 60 seconds to get out or you are not getting out. And make sure that you can cut your seatbelt as well as the seatbelt of your children, your baby, if they are in a car seat, and know exactly what you are going to do so that you do not become one of those stories. So yeah, this is only one of my theories. I have so many. Don't tell me I'm weird. I know that.
Let's talk about the spy whales of Alaska, okay? This just came to my attention in the form of a spooky scary storytime submission submitted by someone who wanted to be called S. And she says last summer, while on a family vacation, she was able to see parts of Alaska that most people will never be able to see, either because they're largely inaccessible by car, or because of restricted military training areas, or because of conservation efforts. But says she was born into a wealthy family of nature lovers, and her mom has always taken them to every national park she could possibly visit. She's been to over 30 in the US as well as multiple around the world, but things in Alaska got strange pretty quickly. And she said there are cruises that depart from the Pacific Northwest, but they wanted to fly in for their 3-week trip to have a fully immersive experience. And so they fly into Juneau. That airport was extremely unlike anything that she's been to before. She said it's extremely small, but surrounded by stretches of untouched land, and she loves to see that as a nature lover herself. But then they boarded another small plane and flew over multiple islands that seemed to be completely uninhabited. The plane looking down at the landscape, she said it was extremely beautiful but also jarring to see because there were vast forests that stretched in every direction, and she sort of got in her head about what could be down there. But then they landed at a small airport, and she put airport in quotes. She said because this place was no bigger than a single room house. Exited the plane on the runway and then were picked up by a local who drove them to a local lodge. And she says it was surrounded by a few single isolated properties. There was also a convenience store in the town, and then there was a small school that had no more than 10 students max, as they were told by a local. The property was beautiful though. There were bears roaming the property, and there was also 2 other families that were staying at the lodge as well as the owners, who was an elderly couple whose grandchildren came up every summer to work for them. They spent a week here and then they went to Anchorage, where they took a train to see some glaciers. They also took a train ride in a first-class car that had glass ceilings so they could look up into the forests of Denali. They were able to ride ATVs and explore the national park, and they ended that trip in Fairbanks. While there, they learned a lot about the local indigenous population and witnessed the most beautiful scenery she says she's ever seen, despite being all over the world. But the majority of the story takes place while staying at the lodge owned by the elderly couple. The owner's grandchildren would pick them up in a van every day to drive them to the docks for their daily activities. And the first of these activities was a boat tour of the national parks. And they were going to be taking this boat into a stretch that went into Glacier Bay National Park. Second day, they rented a local's multi-million-dollar boat to take into a private stretch or restricted leg of Glacier Bay National Park so that they could kayak up to a glacier. That is one of the areas that you need a special permit to visit, but her family had secured it ahead of time. But cruise ships are prohibited from entering this area. So they were the only people there. And while on this tour, the boat captain is telling them stories about people who have been on the run from the law and who have fled to this area to live among the wilderness. He said there's people living deep in these forests that will never see civilization again. And there's also secret U.S. government programs that are being operated from this area. Tells them that he often sees U.S. Navy submarines passing through the waters, as well as Russian submarines that he thinks are attempting to pass through the waters undetected. He tells them that Alaska used to be owned by Russia, and he thinks that Russia is upset that now Alaska is part of the U.S., but we won't go too much into that. Needless to say, S said it was just an overwhelming, eerie sensation of exploring these waters. She just had this feeling of like not being supposed to be there, but she also noted that they saw J.K. Rowling on her mega yacht being given clearance to enter the public leg of the national park. On the third day, they were driven to the docks to meet with a local fishing guide who was going to give them a private deep-sea fishing tour. She said this experience was absolutely awesome. Humpback whales were swimming up next to the boat. They caught a large amount of salmon and halibut, but they were only allowed to keep a certain amount of it due to size and conservation restrictions. On the boat, the guide, who she calls Mike for the story, even though that's not his real name, told them a story that she still thinks about. Mom asked him what the strangest experience that he had had while fishing these waters, and he told them a story that wasn't necessarily supernatural, but that she said still left her unsettled. Mike said he was alone fishing late at night, deep in the waters just outside of the national park, and nothing seemed too out of the ordinary. The night was quiet until it happened. Taking a break from fishing and was looking out into the water when a beluga whale popped its head up next to the boat, and it just looked at him for a second. And this was abnormal in itself because belugas don't usually venture in this area except for in certain seasons. But he said what was stranger was that this whale had a camera surgically embedded in its head. I watched him for a minute, not moving, and he took a photo of it, knowing that nobody would believe him. As he snapped a photo, the whale went back under the surface, and he says he showed his friend, another fisherman, the next day, and both of them determined that it must be a spy whale, something that they had heard about but hadn't really confirmed actually existed. He says most people have no idea that this exists, but there are reports of even spy dolphins. Strangely, there are no recorded instances of whales with cameras surgically embedded into their heads. For spy purposes, but she said she's sharing this because it left her with like a general feeling of unease and just a bad gut feeling that something is going on there that we, the public, do not know about. She said she's unsure if the whale belonged to the U.S. or another country, but she says, I don't know why they would be sending these whales to spy on those parts of the waters, or why U.S. or other country submarines would be moving through these waters at such a frequent rate, especially with that area being largely uninhabited and largely untouched. Said it's probably a long shot, but she was sharing this with the hopes that somebody else from the area, maybe a fishing captain, maybe somebody who's a local tour guide, knows more about this and can give her more information, because she's tried to find more about it online and has turned up nothing. So if you know about this, if you've heard about this, if you have anything to compare this to, please send it in. We'd love to hear it.
Okay, this story sent in from one of my followers is intense. Also, really quickly, trigger warning, there are some unfortunate circumstances regarding a dog. All right, let's get into it. So one of my followers who would like to remain anonymous tells this story. So a little bit of background. Around this time, she had been engaged to a man for 5 years. During that time, she had introduced her cousin, who was basically like a sister to her fiance's brother. She said they hit it off, fell in love, and eventually got married and are still married to this day. Her at the time fiance, though, is now her ex. All right, around 7 years ago, all four of them decided to move from Florida into the mountains of Oregon. Her ex's mom and stepdad had recently purchased 4 acres of land there, and they kind of called it their family compound. The plan was to eventually build on the land, but more immediately, it was more like a gathering place, somewhere to kind of land before they decide to go traveling the following summer. At that time, they were into van life, and they all had their own vans, and they lived there on the property as they worked to build things out and prepare for the winter ahead. She said her ex's mom, Athena, was one of those people that you just never forget. She was genuinely kind, soft, and full of light, the kind of person that you just meet once and you'll remember forever. She said she had a very free-spirited and hippie-like personality. She also said her husband was very similar, very laid back and to the point, and he kind of reminded her of the sea turtle Crush from Finding Nemo. They both loved animals very deeply, and they had 3 dogs, which were their entire world. She even said still to this day, they are the most kind and easygoing people that she's ever known. She mentions that living on that property did have its fair share of spooky or eerie feeling nights as they kind of slept in the van, but they were used to their fair share of sleeping in the van during some creepy times, so they kind of just brushed it off. So after a few months, her then fiance and her had moved back to Florida because he received a job offer. Okay, so she said during that time around when they left, there were some tensions in the family. Everybody started to notice that Athena started to seem off. She wasn't quite herself, and they thought maybe something mental was going on. At first, it was nothing extreme, just subtle changes. So a few months later, she's back in Florida lying on her bed and just studying. And her ex was away for work. So while she's laying there studying, she receives a phone call from Athena's husband, Brian. And she thought right away that this seemed a little bit off. And when she answered, he sounded panicked. And over the phone, she hears him say, "I don't know what to do. Athena has lost her mind." So she asks him, "What do you mean?" And she says what he told her still doesn't feel real. Buckle up. Apparently, Athena had disappeared into the woods for a third night in a row. The 2 previous nights, she had come back naked, dirty, and disoriented. He said she was acting erratically and kept throwing away her phone. She also kept trying to get rid of all of her shoes, and she kept drawing pentagrams all over the house, or taking things from the house and making the shape of a pentagram with them. He even said that the night before, she threatened to rip his heart out, and she was growling at him. She says that this is beyond shocking because Athena is literally the last person you would ever suspect to do something like that. She was just so gentle and innocent, and she barely even was able to get through a scary movie, let alone act like this. She said the idea of her even knowing what a pentagram was felt impossible. And she tells Brian, "Please call the police. It is freezing and it is raining out in the middle of the night." So a few hours went by and her cousin called her crying to update her. They still hadn't found her. And then an hour later, she calls back again, and this time she is screaming. Okay, y'all, here's where that trigger warning comes in. They found Athena deep in the woods. She was found lying naked inside a pentagram, holding one of her dogs, Jake. She was speaking in tongues, and they realized that she had strangled and suffocated the dog. She says even writing this now feels unreal. So the police just took statements, and beyond that, nothing was really done. But the next day, the family did admit Athena to a mental health facility. And she was monitored there for a few days until she was released. Now get this. She said over time, Athena just slowly went back to normal. To this day, she has no memory or understanding of what the heck happened during those few weird weeks. But then she does recall one strange detail. She said she met a woman at a local coffee shop for a Bible study. And she said that this woman blessed her shortly before everything went down. And no one has ever been able to identify or find this woman. She says that she and her cousin had tried for a long time anything to get some answers. She says despite that this happening around 6 years ago, her family still has never fully recovered from this, especially from what happened to Jake, the dog. Her cousin had witnessed things that night that she still refuses to even talk about. She says that the hardest thing to process is that Athena is just now completely back to normal, and everyone is still close with her. Life just continued. But she says she has never stopped wondering what the heck happened. She's like, is it some kind of mental break, something neurological, or something completely unexplainable? It's just one of those things that she's never going to fully understand. All right, guys, have you ever heard of a possible or potential possession story that ended where they just sort of got better on their own? I guess maybe it was from the movies or something. I always thought that it was kind of like it ended real bad, or they needed to do some kind of exorcism to get back to normal. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments. I am sure my follower is going to be up in these comments as well. And if you have a similar creepy story of your own, I would love to hear it. And if you're new here, you got to follow for more creepy story time.
When I was 19 years old, I rented a house with my ex-boyfriend, and at that time we didn't have any kids. I remember this house was for rent for like about a year until we finally decided, like, let's go for it. We called a guy and he said yeah, you know, we can go check it out. You guys can go check it out. So we went to go look at the place, and it needed a lot of fixing, right? So we made a deal that we would fix the stuff in the house, and he would waive the deposit, and he would also waive the first month, so we didn't have to start paying him till the second month. So the day comes, we're finally gonna move into this house, but the carpet was so ugly. Like, I remember it was this orange ass carpet. And so we called the guy up and we said, hey, if we rip the carpet out and we put linoleum down, like, are you cool with that? And he's like, yeah, go ahead, rip it out, fix it up. When we ripped out the carpet, there was a huge stain. Like, when we tore it off, it looked like blood, and it was like somebody bled out. Like, that's how big the stain was. And I remember freaking out, like, what the fuck, like, what the hell is this? But we tried to brush it off, right? Because it was our first place. We were so excited. But I remember this one night we went grocery shopping, and we had 2 dogs at that time. And our living room had French doors that led into the backyard, right? So we get home, and the dogs are inside the house, and we're like, how do they come in? Like, the door was locked when we left. And all my bras and all my underwears were like scattered all over the living room. Only my clothes. And I remember being so freaked out, like, dude, somebody broke in. And we looked around the house, there was like no signs of anybody breaking in, right? But as days went on, I started getting more scared in the house. Like, it became a fear. Like, I hated when nighttime came because I was so terrified in the house. I kept getting so many panic attacks. I had so much anxiety, and I did not understand why. I was just so scared. And then I vividly remember one day taking a shower during the day, right? And nobody was home. And I'm in the bathroom taking a shower, blah, blah, blah. And I feel somebody pull my hair. And I was so terrified. I remember not even like washing my hair completely and just getting out of the shower and wrapping myself up in the towel and like drying myself as fast as I could so I can leave. That's how scared I was. And just random things happened. I remember just things dropping, the door opening. And so I remember his mom telling me, like, you should do a limpia. And so I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try it, because how I'm feeling, like, no, what the fuck, I'm losing my mind here. So I remember doing a limpia, and when I get to my stomach, the egg cracks. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, is this normal? And so I remember she told me, though, if it cracks, continue to do it with another one, but keep doing it. So this happened like 4 times. Every time I do it in my stomach, it cracked. Come to find out, I was pregnant. And so I don't know if they were like trying to harm me and like the baby was protecting me, or it was like some kind of sign, like the eggs cracking, like that there was a baby in there. I have no idea. But I was scared, right? So I remember doing that, and then I started feeling better. And so then my daughter was born, right? My first daughter, the one I told you I'm so connected with. And after that, I was like, okay, I think that we should go get like a professional limpia by somebody that really knows what they're doing, right? Because even though I started feeling better, I didn't feel 100% like myself. I remember going to this lady, and she told us, like, there is a spirit attached to him, and I'm not going to go into detail, but somebody that we knew had done something to me. And like the hairs on her arm were like standing up, and she's like, look at how you're, like, mira como vienes, look at you, like they really did something. But she's like, this little baby that you had, like, she's the one that saved you from nothing else happening to you. So she ended up doing the limpias on us. And I remember my dad at first was kind of skeptical, and so was I, because we're like, you know, like, is she legit? But there was one time where she was doing a limpia on my dad, and my dad started cussing her out in his head, like, because it was hurting, I guess. She was hitting him with the branches. And she was like, I'm gonna do the limpia and everything, but please don't be cussing me out. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, she's reading my mind. Anyways, she ended up doing limpias, right? But I remember the last time we went with her, she said, please don't come back. Why does my camera do this? And we're like, what? Like, and she's like, every time I do the limpias, I cannot get up from bed for days at a time. She's like, I'm sorry, that's all I can do for you guys. And so we didn't go back with her. And after that, like, I did start to feel like myself again. But it was such a scary experience. Like, everything I went through, in the house. I don't know, my camera always zooms in and out, but it was just like a crazy experience. Like the feeling I had, it was horrible, and like I could feel the negativity in that house. Oh, anyways, we ended up moving out of that house, right? That house till this day has not been rented or sold, and that is already 16 years. Oh, and also there was a car outside that house that was parked, right? And I remember even when we moved in, like we told the guy, like, is this car gonna stay here? And he's like, yeah, just, it shouldn't bother you guys, just leave it parked there. And that car is still there. Like, that car has never been moved. I'm like, 16 years, you never sold this house, you never rented it. I don't know why. I don't think I want to know, because I feel whatever happened in the house, I'm sure was nothing good, and whatever did happen kind of fed off of what was thrown at me, whatever brujeria they did to me. And I left so many details out just to keep this video short, but it was just a crazy experience I had that was so terrifying. And when I think about it some days, it's like, fuck, people really be out there doing crazy shit like that and like hurting other people.
Let's read another true and scary story from Reddit. What happened that night? There was a time I heard someone or something in my sister's room in the middle of the night, but I still can't explain it. I was around 13 at the time of the incident, and I had a lot of time to waste since it was summer break, and therefore I decided it would be best to spend my night staying up late in the night and enjoy my summer without the constant noise from my family. Not saying I don't love them, of course. Anyways, it was probably around 12 in the morning when this all took place, and was raining pretty heavily outside. I was enjoying my night with the loud rain and my book, and then I heard it. My sister's door leading to the backyard was unlocked by someone. I put my book down before lifting my head to try and listen in better. That's when it began to move things on her desk, which at the time my sister had a lot of pens and pencils and little gadgets on her desk from school which were all being knocked around. At this point, I started believing it was all in my head or noise from the rain, which is when I decided to sit up completely and put my ear to the wall. That's when I heard them. It was two people, a man and a woman. They were speaking in some weird distorted English that I couldn't make out. That's when I assumed it was my sister and her boyfriend at the time deciding to stay here instead of his place. I sent her a message and asked if she was home. Soon after, she messaged me back saying no, she's not. In that moment, I heard her closet door open and her clothes on the hangers began moving around, and before I could hear more, I got more messages from my sister. I picked up my phone and saw she messaged me to go to my parents' room. I knew she was right, so I got up and walked over to my door and began to shake, thinking about needing to pass my sister's room to go to my parents'. I was scared, but I was prepared for whatever was to come. Now for this next part, keep in mind, anytime my sister would leave the house, she always closed her bedroom door. I took a deep breath and opened the door and dashed out, but not before my curiosity won over and I turned my head to the right to see her door open and what I feel to have been a shadow. I made it safely to my parents' room as I woke them up, and my sister came home with her boyfriend. They checked the back and they noticed the fence had a broken piece with a brick on either side, almost as a stepping stool for something or someone to get over it. They came back into the room as my parents were scolding me, blaming this happening for not praying to God. I wasn't religious at the time, but I sure as heck am now. My sister told my parents that nothing looked out of place and the door wasn't unlocked nor the windows. I don't know, maybe my sister's room was just haunted. There was always something happening in there. What I do know is my heart and my unease still remains the same as that day's any time I mention this story. Even now as I write this, my heart still feels heavy and my throat feels swollen shut, but I need to get this out. Thank you for listening to my real story, and please, if you know what I heard, let me know. And then somebody in the comments said if you're using drugs, this is probably why, because they had a similar experience when they were in psychosis. But I feel like I disagree, because there was a brick that wasn't there before, where someone probably used it to step over the fence. So I'm not sure. And then this story was posted by Dense Necessary 8636 on r/True Scary Stories. As always, if you guys have any stories you'd like me to read, please email them to me and I will get to them if I can. And I will see you in the next one.
This story sent in from one of my followers, Tamara, gives me absolute goosebumps. She met her best friend at the age of 5. She knew of her and they had different classes than each other, but they became very close at the end of primary school, which was end of year 7 going into year 8. She said that they had their fair share of fallouts, as young children often do. And unfortunately, when Tamara was 15 years old, she ended up moving away. She said they had lost touch over an argument and she couldn't even remember what that even was anymore. Tamara said that one day her old friend had reached out to her, but the subject of why she was contacting her made her not want to answer, so Tamara did not answer. So she goes to school the next day, and all of a sudden she's being overwhelmed by text messages and phone calls. She finds out that her old friend actually had just passed away a few hours prior. She was just about to turn 16 years old. Tamara says that this was absolutely devastating. You know, despite the way things went down, she has really regretted over the years not answering back, knowing full well that it wouldn't have changed anything, but it would have been nice to speak to her again, especially before that happened. So fast forward, Tamara is now 17 years old, and she says that she can feel the presence of her friend all the time. She'd even have random times where she'd hear knocking at the door, and when she'd go and answer it, nobody was there, but she just had this feeling like it was her old friend. And she'd sometimes even smell her scent, like she just knew that this was her. Her father even told her that she should invite her in, but using her name and invite only her in. She said she also had lots of dreams about her old friend and all of the fun that they used to have together. But now on this particular night, she had a different kind of dream. She said that in this dream, her friend had put her hands down on her belly and she had a bump. It was a baby bump in the dream. She said the next morning she kept on visualizing her doing this and putting her hands there, and she could not get this out of her head. The really weird thing is that she was due to get a contraceptive injection that day, but because of the dream and how she couldn't get this thought out of her head, she decided it would be best to take a pregnancy test. And yeah, you guessed it, she was pregnant. She said that the injection she would have gotten was extremely dangerous if you are pregnant. She says that she feels if it wouldn't have been for her old friend appearing in her dream like that, she would not have her 14-year-old son today. She says it's been 17 years without her, but she's always thanking her for coming to her in her dream and saving her baby. How awesome is that story? Let her know your thoughts in the comments. And have you ever had a loved one sort of come to you in a dream just to maybe say goodbye or hang out or even help you with something? Let me know all the stories. I gotta hear them. And if you're new here, follow for more creepy story time.
This might be pointless because I don't even know if this account will still exist after I post this because things are getting weird over here. But here goes nothing. This happened last October in Jason's Bush, Northern California. If you've never heard of it, it's remote, like properly remote. Pine forests, granite mountains, barely any cell phone service. The nearest town is Ashford Creek. A one gas station, one saloon, and a couple of small businesses. Even a psychic, which initially made us all laugh on the drive up there. The four of us, me, hi, I'm Evan by the way, my husband Mateo and our friends Riley and Harper rented this insane glass house up on a private slope overlooking the valley. Infinity pool, hot tub, floor-to-ceiling windows, fully stocked bar. It was giving rich, lesbian aunt energy. Our friend Helen was joining us in a couple of days. She'd driven cross-country and had holed up in an Airbnb before making her way to us. The first 3 days were PERFECT. Drunk by noon, swimming by day with the desert sun scorching down on us. Hot tub at night, music blasting. We felt like we were the only people in the world. But day 4... Mateo saw something.
Oh no.
He's a photographer. He never stopped snapping photos. Even on our wedding day, he was the photographer. He's a total obsessive. He'd been snapping pics from the moment we arrived and showed us all regularly. We'd nod along, impressed at first, but it became a little wearing eventually after him making us stare at the millionth Jason tree in a row. So on the 4th night, he was taking sunset shots from the balcony when he froze. He said there was someone standing up near the tree line on the mountain above us. At first, we thought it was Helen, our friend at the Airbnb. But it wasn't her. It was just stood there. Not hiking, not moving, just standing there. When he removed his eye from the lens, he looked again, but nothing, apparently. We teased him about it. The place was amazing, don't get me wrong, but as soon as the sun went down, it was creepy. Silence, except for the coyotes surrounding us. That night, we were in the hot tub drinking wine and fantasizing about moving to Jason's Bush full-time. I'd be so happy here, Riley sighed. Let's move, Harper, come on. Let's be country bumpkins and leave LA behind. You can still get your Air One smoothie at weekends. She flicked water at her wife's face playfully with her foot. Her hundreds of ear piercings glittered in her ear and her short brown hair was plastered to her head, the tip of her nose pink from the sun. What would you do then? Harper responded affectionately, wiping her face. The only thing you know how to do is tattoo, and doesn't look like there's many people around. And then we heard something up the slope, crunching, like footsteps. We all looked, and I swear to God, there was a silhouette up there. Just for a second against the sky. We called out, no answer. Then the silhouette disappeared, almost in front of my eyes. Mateo looked at me, fear in his eyes. I told you, hon, there's someone there. I sighed. I was starting to freak out too, but it felt like if I admitted it, then things would only get worse. I looked to Harper, searching for an alliance. She was a no-nonsense, ball-busting PR queen. Yep. No time for nonsense, I thought logically. We were the same. We were usually the ones aligned against our woo-woo other halves. She rolled her eyes and flicked her long blonde hair over her shoulder. Matty, babe, there's no one there, I promise you. We're all alone. Your imagination is bound to run wild. Look at poor Riley. She thinks she can open a tattoo studio here in Hicksville, USA, in a town with about 40 people in it. Speaking of Hicksville, I said, my brow furrowing, has anyone heard from Helen? No, but you know what she's like, Harper responded, knocking back a chilled glass of champagne. She's probably trying to finish that crappy novel she's been working on for so long. Harper, Riley said. Slowly, a warning. All I'm saying is, get a better dream. We all laughed and the ribbing continued. We finished the bottle of wine, opened another, and laughed and drank until the early hours. By the time we went to bed, all memories of the silhouette was forgotten. The next morning, we went outside. We were eating our fruit and yogurt, and Mateo made his way over to the cacti that surrounded the house, ready to start his days snapping. Evan! The tone in his voice sent shivers down my spine, and I jogged over to him. There were footprints behind the fence at the edge of the property. Bare footprints. Huge. Way too big to belong to any of us. There was something else too. For every footprint was a handprint. Like something was walking on its hands and feet. Its human hands and feet. Mateo just stood there, camera hanging limply from his neck. I crouched down. The soil back there was that pale, sandy dust that shows everything. The prints were clear, toes, arch, heel, deep. Like whoever made them was heavy. Riley came jogging over with a spoon still in her mouth. Why'd you look like someone died? She followed our gaze and slowly pulled the spoon out. Oh. Harper walked up last, sunglasses on, coffee in hand. What are we gasping at now? She stopped mid-sentence. No witty comeback for once. The prints started at the fence. Not from the trees, from the fence. As in, something had been standing right outside the property. Mateo swallowed. They don't come from the forest, they're just here. Where did they come from? They don't go back either, Riley added. She was right. No exit trail, no scuff marks, just 10 or 12 massive bare footprints and handprints in a cluster like someone had been there for a while, watching. I felt my stomach drop. Okay, so best case scenario? Bigfoot, Riley said immediately. Shut up. Fine. Worst case scenario? She shot back. No, Harper said sharply. Let's not spiral. It's probably just some idiot hiker, drunk, took his boots off. Mateo stood up pale. At 1 a.m. in 40-degree weather. Silence. The air suddenly felt heavier. The house behind us, all glass and clean lines, didn't feel protective anymore. It felt exposed. I heard myself say it before I could stop it. Let's go into town.
This girl emailed me and said that her and her friends went to the beach and saw a creature that chased them all the way home. The story is wild. So we're going to call this girl Mary for the story. So Mary is from South Africa, and in December every year, her and her family go to their beach house. Mary was 14 at the time and her sister was 17 at the time. She looked up to her sister. She used to follow her around everywhere and just tag along with her and her friends wherever they went. Mary loved hanging out with the older kids, and this wasn't a problem for her sister because her and her sister were very close. She said that every time they would go out, they would go walk around with random kids on the streets that they would meet, and apparently by the sea there it's pretty safe, so they would do this at night a lot. So one night it was her sister, and 2 other boys. We're gonna call them Kai and Jaden. She said that the houses there were built on the side of a mountain, and because they weren't on sea level, the streets were very steep. So on this night they're walking down one of these hills and they're walking towards kind of like this construction site where they were building a house from like this specific slab of concrete, and they chose to kind of sit there because you could look over the houses and you could see the horizon of the sea from where they were sitting. Now Mary's sister has this gift where she always knows when something bad bad is about to happen. She starts to feel off. And Mary always notices when this happens because her sister will start scanning her surroundings and she'll get very stiff and quiet. Her sister also says that when this starts to happen, she gets like this tingling feeling in her feet, which is really weird because that happens to me. I know exactly what she's talking about. So her sister pulls Mary aside and goes, listen, something's going to happen tonight. I feel off. I know something's going to happen tonight. I'm nervous. Now, Mary didn't really take her sister seriously at this point because her sister was always trying to scare her because Mary would get scared pretty easily. And Mary would get scared pretty easily because she's had a lot of experiences in her life. She actually sent me another story, which was mind-blowingly terrifying, which I will tell you guys soon, but I digress. So she just thought her sister was trying to scare her. So they go back to the concrete slab where those two boys are, and they're just sitting there and they're talking and they're laughing and they're having a good time. Well, at least Mary and the two boys are, because she can tell that her sister is not having a good time. 10 minutes goes by and she's looking at her sister and her sister just looks paranoid. Well, a little bit more time passes and her sister's paranoia actually starts to calm down and she starts engaging in conversation. She's relaxed just out of nowhere. This would be premature because 5 minutes pass and suddenly they start to hear these rocks rolling down the side of the hill. And then they hear twigs cracking behind her sister about 5 meters up. So out of curiosity, obviously they want to know what's behind them, so they look. And when she turns around, she said that what she saw was the most horrifying thing she had ever seen in her life. She said there was this massive creature on all fours with skinny, horrible limbs, and they were like pinned straight. She said that its back was bent unnaturally with its spine and bones poking visibly. It was easily 6 feet tall on all fours. She said it was pretty dark outside, but from the street light, it was coming from a street lamp, she could see this thing clear as day. Either it didn't have eyes or they were closed because she saw nothing there. She did see its mouth. It had this very wide slit for a mouth. Her sister just starts screaming and the two boys turn around. They see it too and they just book it. Now they ran to the right of them where the road kind of goes down, and her sister was wearing sandals, so she was running slower than the rest of them. As her sister is running, her sister starts hearing this cracking noise. You know how when you crack your knuckles, that sound that it makes? She said that she was hearing that, but it was prominent. It was loud. And then she starts hearing this clicking sound. And so she turns around and she sees this thing chasing them, just on all fours, just galloping behind them, making this clicking and cracking sound, like its bones were cracking. She said the way that its limbs were moving was just unnatural. It was bending in weird ways and it just looked wrong. So they all run into the house. They finally get home and they just shut the cottage doors and they lock it. She said that after they got home, they were so terrified that those guys actually ended up spending the night at their house because they were too afraid to walk across the street where they lived. They did not want to go outside. And apparently her parents stayed in a bigger house that was next to their smaller house. So they had like their own little house that they were staying in. Next morning, when they all woke up, the boys finally went over to their house and they went over to their parents' house and they were crying. They were sobbing. They were so terrified and they were telling their parents what happened, but their parents didn't believe them. Their parents don't believe in anything paranormal and they definitely don't believe in creatures. And Mary said that she didn't believe in creatures either, and neither did her sister until this happened. And now they know that every time her sister gets that weird feeling that it is paranormal. And she said that it's pretty handy to this day. But probably the weirdest thing, and one of the scariest parts of the story, I would say, is that her sister, to this day, still sees that thing inside of their house. So I don't know if that's a trauma response or if she's actually like being haunted by this creature. And if so, what could it be? Like, what would this be? Because I know some of you are going to say SW, maybe some of you are going to say Wendigo. You know, I don't know. I don't want anyone to feel disrespected. I have spoken to quite a few people who are Native American who, because I've asked, like, is it disrespectful to tell stories about SWs? And every single one of them has said no, as long as you don't say the name. That's the only part that is disrespectful, is when you say the name, because it's very real. I'm not saying that's what this is. I'm just saying, you know, I would actually like to know if someone in the comment section is Native American. Can you please tell me if it is disrespectful to tell a story about an SW? I would love to know that, because if you feel it is, I don't want to tell those stories. But if it is just the name, then I will tell the stories. But I would like to hear it from someone who is Native American, please. Like I said, I've spoken to Native American people before, and that's what they said. But like, if you could tell me in the comments, I would love that. Now, I did some research, and I couldn't find anything in the South African culture that matches the description of the creature that she described. So there's that. But drop what you guys think it is in the comments. What do you think this was? What could it have been? Drop your opinions, your thoughts, your suggestions. And then, as always, please be respectful.
And I'm not gonna lie, bro, I think I just unlocked a new phobia. Oh, for real, bro, what is it? Doors. Yes, I'm scared of doors now. This whole thing started with a random guy who was spending the night in his hotel room. You see, this guy was basically chilling, but then he noticed something. The guy began to notice that the bathroom doorknob is moving by itself. And when I say moving, I'm not talking about slightly moving like a screw is loose or whatever. No, I'm talking about moving like... So knowing that he was the only one there, he got so scared, and the first thing he did was grabbing his phone and then started filming. First, he was filming from a distance because you gotta understand the man. He was so shocked and confused. He was like... But then the doors just kept going, you know, the doorknob just kept moving. So he was like, you know what, let's open it. So he really got closer, he picked his... decided to risk it all. He decided to open the door. Slightly opened the door and you can actually notice that he was shaking, okay? You can hear it in his voice. Kept moving around in the bathroom, but he couldn't find anything. So who was moving that doorknob? Well, we don't know because this is the last video that we will get from this guy.
Oh, man. She crazy.
Bro, if I was him, I would have never touched that door. And for all the Timmy Tough Knuckles in the comments saying, oh bro, this is not even scary. Well, I hope this happens to you. We will see what you're capable of.
When I first heard this story, it gave me little creeps. I got goosebumps, so you guys have to hear it too. So this mom explains that her daughter was always super active. She was always doing something. She was never just sitting still. So one day she is in the car with her best friend and her daughter is in the back seat and they're on a road that had a lot of traffic. Out of nowhere, the daughter opens up the door in the back seat and she falls out. Everybody saw it happen. Even the cars that were behind her stopped immediately. Soon a lot of other cars stopped too to see what the hell was happening. She actually stayed frozen, like she couldn't get out of the car, and she turned to her best friend and said, you need to get off, you need to go look, I cannot see, because she didn't want to see if something bad had happened to her daughter. She can hear when the people who were outside of the car were looking for the daughter under the car, in the sidewalk. They would start screaming out the daughter's name and nobody could find her. In that very moment, the girl's sister was passing by in her own car and obviously stopped when she recognized the car. She came to her window and asked her, where's her daughter, like what is going on? She admits that she was in shock and she couldn't say anything. 5 minutes passed after that and her daughter was still nowhere to be found. Everyone was still looking for her daughter and she just couldn't get her legs to move. But 5 minutes after that, she started to hear a little girl crying coming from the back seat of the car. When she turned to look, she sees that her daughter was literally cramped up on the floor of the back seat and crying. That's finally the moment where her body reacted. She immediately goes to the back seat, carries her daughter, and just starts hugging her. Now this is where the creepy fucking part comes in, because she says that when she hugs her daughter, her first immediate thought was, this is not my daughter. Her best friend and her sister were like, that is your daughter, like what is wrong with you? They basically thought that maybe she was just in shock and that's why she was thinking that. She says that the girl does look a lot like her daughter, but she feels like there is something different about her. She explains that after that day, her daughter never talked again and they're having to take her to the doctor because she also has trouble eating. She doesn't understand why her daughter stopped talking and stopped eating. It got to the point where people were sending the police to her house because they were saying she's crazy for thinking that that is not her daughter. I would literally watch this movie, but unfortunately, like, this is real life for someone. Fuck that. Like, what do you guys think happened?
Being born and raised in the Appalachian Mountains, I've experienced a lot of unexplainable things, and I'm not the only one. Today I'm going to be sharing a story with you that a follower sent to my email. I moved to Pennsylvania right after turning 15. Before that, I lived on the West Coast, so I had no knowledge of what happened in the Appalachian Mountains. Nothing about those rules like closing your curtains at night or not responding to your name being called when nobody's around. In our house, we had a crawl space on the second floor. I had claimed the bedroom with the door to the crawl space. And once summer started next year, I started hearing scratching coming from inside of the crawl space. I thought it was a squirrel, but my dad couldn't find anything inside. The scratching continued, but I ignored it. At some point, I thought I could hear my name being called from behind the door. Now, my parents were very religious. I was taught that if I heard my name being called, it was the Holy Ghost trying to tell me something or trying to comfort me. I said a silent prayer to myself when I heard my name being called in that house. I think I had really just got lucky, and I had moved out of that bedroom and into a different bedroom without the crawl space after my sister had left for college and I got to move into her room. I had another experience in that house soon after I turned 18. I was packing up my bags, getting ready to move away from college, and I had a lot of anxiety because of that. Something that helped me was getting fresh air. It was already nighttime, but I stepped out on the back porch to get some fresh air. The moon was really bright that night, and I could see most of the yard very well. It was a large yard, roughly 6 acres, with a creek and a wooded area to one side, a hill and a wooded area on the opposite side of the creek, and behind a small pond in the back of the yard was the road. I knew this area had animals that were out and about, especially late at night, so I took a look around to see if I could spot a fox or a deer. At the road, I could see what looked like 2 glowing eyes attached to some figure. It looked like a deer, but it was staring at me, and the porch light was on, so it was very clearly lit. I thought it was kind of cool until it started getting closer. The yard was massive, and there was a rough 3 to 4 acres of land between the road and the house. This thing was moving fast and moving very intently. It got over the guardrail and was making a straight line towards me. Even with the moonlight, I couldn't really make out what it was, but at that moment, I thought it was like a wolf or something. I ran inside, locked the doors, turned out the light, and ran into my bedroom. I spent the rest of the night underneath my blankets and muttering prayers to myself. In the morning, I told my dad about the animal I had saw outside last night, and he had only found some scratches on the wood on the porch.
I used to babysit for a family, and they had a really big house, but they didn't use any cameras, which I thought was odd because I feel like every big rich person house, they usually have cameras on the inside. But the mom just told me we value our privacy, and that was fine by me. They had one kid. It was a little girl. She was 6 years old. She didn't talk very much. She didn't really play that much either. A lot of the times when I would come over to watch her, she would just kind of be in front of the TV. The only rule the parents ever had for me was she goes to bed at exactly 8:30 p.m. and do not go up inside of her room unless she specifically calls your name. I remember thinking that was oddly specific, but again, not my kid, so, I'm gonna abide by their rules. The first night was somewhat normal. I took her up the stairs, 8:30 p.m., got her into bed. I read her a little story. She didn't really say or do much, she just kind of stared at me. Again, tucked her in, went back downstairs. I turned on the TV, I was hanging out, and then around 10 p.m., I started to hear something. It sounded like footsteps going on upstairs, slow but pacing back and forth. So I know that she was in her room, and then I know that right above me was the nursery where they used to have like a baby monitor, and they kept the baby monitor in the drawer, so I went and grabbed it just to take a look on like what was going on above me. So I turn it on, and I don't see much. The old crib is still intact. There's nothing in the bedroom. The door was still closed, so I texted the mom and I said, "Hey, is she supposed to be out of bed?" She replied almost instantly, and she said, "If she didn't call your name, don't go upstairs." And that just made me feel a little sick because the footsteps were still happening right above me. Back and forth for almost an hour, and then they finally stopped. I fell asleep on the couch, and then I woke up the next morning. I went upstairs to go check on her. She was back in her bed like nothing had even happened. We hung out that whole day, and then 8:30 comes around again. I go upstairs, I tuck her in, I read her a book, and I go back downstairs. 10 o'clock rolls around, footsteps. This time they were a little heavier, a little more aggressive. Going back and forth still. I checked the monitor again, still empty. However, I did notice something that I didn't notice first night. The monitor was no longer facing the bed. It was now facing the closet. I know that I didn't move the camera upstairs, so I just kind of stared intently at this monitor, and I didn't see anything for a minute there, and then I saw it. Just the most subtle, slight movement. Right inside the tiny crack of the closet door, it was like somebody shifted their weight slightly and peeked out. I paused the TV. I held my breath because I'm terrified at the moment, and I just sat there and listened, and then that's when I heard it. A voice, soft, right into the mic of the monitor. "Don't come in here." I dropped the monitor, and when it fell on the ground, it hit one of the buttons and it turned the camera. And I saw a slight figure, and it was tall, too tall to be a kid. So I sent a text out to the parents, and I left immediately. I told them that I had to go home for an emergency. And then the next morning came, and the mom texted me, and she said, "You went in her room, didn't you?" She wasn't mad. She was very calm. And I just told her, I said, "No, I didn't go in her room." And then she said, "That's really weird." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because something did." She hung up after saying that. I blocked her number. I was never going to babysit for this family again. And then a couple weeks later in the mail, I got a letter, and it just said a couple things, and then it said, "Thank you for not going in when she called your name." And I never told anybody this part before, but the second night when I was looking at the monitor, I heard something before I heard the "don't come in here." And it was a little girl, her little voice crying in the closet, saying my name. And I have felt guilty ever since for not going up there.
Your spooky story time, and the owl outside his door wasn't actually an owl. My family is from the Mexican state of Michoacan, often regarded as the birthplace of Dia de los Muertos. Despite my family's hometown having 2 Catholic cathedrals, there is a strong presence of folk spirituality. Many people practice witchcraft and show devotion to the Grim Reaper. The town is filled with urban legends. A little girl who appears on a swing at midnight, a large black dog seen during the witching hour, and the distant sound of bells and hooves from an unseen chariot when everyone is supposed to be asleep. My family home has stood for over 70 years. Generations have lived there. Some have even passed away within its walls. When I was a child in that house, I would hear knocking on the metal-clad doors, along with whispers in Spanish. I could never clearly make out what was being said, though once I believe I heard, "Don't be afraid." Still, I was. One night, as I tried to fall asleep, I heard footsteps outside, accompanied by the hooting of an owl. As the owl's cries grew louder, so did the footsteps, until suddenly only the footsteps remained, and then they too faded away. I eventually fell asleep, but only out of exhaustion. The next day, I told my great aunt, she was about 84 at the time, what I had experienced. She seemed unfazed and simply told me not to be afraid. But when I mentioned the owl, she paused, visibly concerned, before collecting herself and insisting it was all just my imagination. Years later, I recount the story to one of my aunts, my mom's older sister. That's when she revealed the truth my great aunt had shared with her. The owl I heard that night was believed to be Lechuza, a shape-shifting entity said to take the form of an owl. And the footsteps I heard, they weren't something to fear. They were the guardian angels protecting me. In a town where witchcraft and the occult are part of everyday life in the shadows, not every presence is meant to harm. The spirits that protected me that night are believed to still watch over that house, and over those who inhabit it, both living and dead. It's kind of like a haunted house version of Encanto. So as soon as you started talking about the owl, that was the first thing I thought, because I know that in some cultures, an owl is the presence of something evil, something shifting into an owl shape. So that's really cool that that kind of validated that thought for me. Also, how cool is it that you had like a guardian angel coming to help you, and you didn't even understand what this was when you were a kid. You were just like, I heard the owl, I heard the chariot, and the next thing you know, all I heard was the chariot. And then years later, they're like, yeah, because the chariot was the angel that chased away this evil spirit. Let me know in the comments what you guys think, or if any of you have ever had a similar experience or anything else paranormal, please send me your story.
Now, here is my top 5 creepiest national parks in America. Coming in at number 5, we have the Palo Alto National Battlefield. Now, this is considered to be the only Civil War battle that took place in Texas. And you have an area where a very bloody Civil War battle took place. There are bound to be some spirits, and often people report these zombie soldiers. Now, there was this trucker and his wife who were looking for a place to sleep, and they found themselves pulling off the road next to this open field. At the time, they didn't know that this was a Civil War battlefield. They were just looking for a place to sleep. So they go to bed that night, and they're in the back of the truck, when they start hearing screams, moans, and groans coming from outside. As they go to the front of the truck and they turn on the headlights, they see these shapes moving towards their truck. As they approach closer, they could see they are missing limbs. They are bloody, and they look almost like zombie soldiers. And they surrounded this truck, and they begin to bang on the side of the truck, trying to get in. Eventually, this truck driver gets in the front seat. He starts the engine, and he takes off. They make their way to a truck stop, and when they get out, they're surprised to see that the truck is completely covered in bloody handprints. So, at number 5, the Palo Alto National Battlefield is considered a very creepy national park that you could visit. Now, coming in at number 4, there's a place known as the Parallel Forest. It is located in the Wichita Mountain Wildlife Refuge. And this place is very, very eerie. It is a forest of about 20,000 red cedar trees that were planted during the Dust Bowl in hopes that it would prevent some of the erosion that was taking place. Now, they planted these trees precisely 6 feet apart. And because of their perfect arrangement, this forest is dark throughout the day, and it is very eerie when you walk through it. And a lot of people have reported the feeling of being watched, the feeling that something touched them. There are orbs. Some people believe this place is a portal. There are many reports of witches and satanic worship. But one of the eeriest things that occurred there is the story of a young man who found himself hiking through the Parallel Forest. And one day, as he made his way down this row of trees, he began to hear a whisper. And it was almost like someone was talking. But as he looked around, there was nothing there. And he said he started to hear the wind blowing, but the trees stood still. And that's when he heard a voice say, "Do you want to play?" And so he took off running and he got out of there. Coming in at number 3, we have the Badlands National Park. Now, the Badlands is known for something they call the Badlands Banshee. No one really knows where this spirit came from, but she is often described as this woman wearing a white tattered dress, long black stringy hair, and this pale white face. And often hikers who are hiking in the Badlands National Park, especially near the Watchdog Butte, report seeing this woman who is screaming, and she is speaking in an unrecognizable language. And when these hikers cannot understand what she is saying, she begins to get vividly angry, and she starts flailing and screaming, and eventually she disappears. And it's said that if you see the Badlands Banshee, something bad is going to happen to you. There are also reports of spiders the size of dogs, often recognized by the nearby Native Americans. There are reports of devil dogs or howlers. Many people have seen UFOs, and even there have been these Bigfoot sightings of these very 3 to 4 foot tall, small Bigfoot-like creatures. Coming in at number 4,
So I wanted to come on here and talk about the lady in Maryland who didn't pay her roofers and called ICE on her roof people and got them detained. And so, yeah, everybody has their point of view as far as like what an evil person she is and she's going to get hers, etc., etc. And here's the thing, spiritually speaking, what she just did is just completely alter her current reality, even into her next lifetime. You cannot do stuff like this and expect the rest of your life to be hunky-dory. And on top of what people don't understand is, you know, people are like, oh, when are they going to get there? So here's the thing. Some of the stuff that happens to people, that karma or whatever you want to call it, oh, I don't see it happening. You know, we always want somebody to kind of like die, or I don't know, the worst of the worst. But there's things that happen to people that we do not get to see behind the scenes. And here's the thing, energetically, the amount of people that are sending probably the worst energy towards this lady is probably astronomical, right? So the chances of her not feeling this at all in this lifetime is slim to none. She could probably get sick. She could probably be at the mercy of the law herself. She could probably, be humbled in ways that we will never see. There's so many things that could happen to her, especially financially. See, people don't understand that love and money are on the same frequency. So she could totally get fucked money-wise, Oh yeah, my roof is fucked up and I didn't want to pay for it. Now she's probably going to have more problems. The energy of the people who fixed her roof, let's see how long that roof actually stays on. You get what I'm saying? Like, there's so many things that people don't understand when it comes to energy and who we are and how it affects us all as a whole. This lady's not going to get away with it. It's either going to be in this lifetime or the following lifetime where she's really going to get affected. And again, a lot of times we think that people are not going through something. They're not going to announce every single time they're sick or some sort of financial burden or something happened to their family. Remember, if you say, oh, I want this person dead, and that person doesn't die, but their cousin dies, you get what I'm saying? It doesn't affect you directly. It'll affect the things around you in most cases. So, I don't know. I feel like this lady's really gonna feel it, and I hope her fucking roof caves in.
I got an email from a girl who said that she had a mimic in her house that used to whisper things before they happened, and then it terrorized her. We're going to call this girl Caitlin for the story. So Caitlin and her family had just moved into a new house. Now, rumor had it from some people that she had talked to around the area that there was a mimic in that house and that it used to whisper things before it happened to the previous tenants. Now, Caitlin didn't really believe this until this night. So one night, she's home alone with her siblings while her mom is out. Caitlin's just chilling at her house when suddenly she gets this really terrifying feeling, like there's something wrong before anything had happened. She's just trying to ignore it, right? So she's just sitting in her room, she's on her phone, when suddenly she hears something. She hears something right behind her door say, "One of you is going missing tonight." Caitlin said when she heard this, she froze. She doesn't really know what to do at this point. She's absolutely terrified and she doesn't want that to happen again. So under her breath, she just says, "Stop it." And after she says this, she just sits there for a second. She can't move. She has no idea what to do when she hears it again, except for this time it says, at this point, her chest just tightens, and all she can think about is that she just wants this to stop. And as she's sitting there thinking about that, she hears her little brother. He was calling her name from downstairs, but something sounded wrong. His voice was too perfect. It was too calm. She has a good feeling that this isn't her brother, but out of curiosity, she gets up and she goes and she slightly opens the door, and then bzzz, her phone just goes off. It was a text message from him, and all he said was, "Are you upstairs?" And her stomach just dropped because she had just heard his voice come from downstairs. She's just standing there, terrified, when before she can even reply, she hears, "Caitlin, hurry up!" in her brother's voice right outside her door. So she starts backing away from the door and she is absolutely shaking, trying to think of anything that could make this stop, but she couldn't think of anything. Suddenly she hears this shriek come from downstairs. It's a scream coming from her sister, but it screams and then it abruptly stops. So it's kind of like, ah! She runs to the edge of the stairs because she's worried that maybe something happened to her sister or she doesn't really understand what the hell is going on in her house. But as soon as she gets to the steps, darkness, no sound, nothing. And she hears it, her sister's voice softly saying, "Caitlin, come downstairs, we need help." She said she knew it wasn't her sister. She knew that that was not her voice. As she's sitting there thinking this, she hears bzzz. Her phone startles her, and she looks down, and she sees it's a text from her brother. And her brother says, "I'm in hiding. Do not come downstairs. There is something else here with us." So he's hearing all of this too. At this point, Caitlin's hands are shaking. She slowly starts stepping back, and that's when she sees it for the first time. There is a shadow at the end of the stairs, bending in a way like it didn't fit in the house. Then it started speaking. "Caitlin, Caitlin, Caitlin," switching from different family members' voices, first her sister's, then her mom's, then her brother's. And it's doing this as it takes one step closer to her, another step closer to her. Just Caitlin, Caitlin, Caitlin. She books it into her room and slams the door. She's just in her room covering her ears, again, trying to think of a way to make this stop, when she just hears the footsteps get closer and closer and heavier as it's repeatedly saying her name in different family members' voices, until it finally stops right outside her door, and then there's silence, but only for a moment, because a couple seconds later, in her own voice, she hears, "Open the door, Caitlin," in this ungodly whisper, and then everything went completely quiet. The next morning, her mom gets home and just like everything was normal, came up to her and goes, "Hey, did you hear anything last night?" She asked this question for two reasons. One, her little brother never came out of hiding, so he was hiding that whole time. And I'm assuming that her mother found her little brother in hiding, and her little brother told her mom what happened, and so she was coming to her to corroborate his story. But the second reason she asked is because her sister never came home. Do you remember what that thing whispered to her at the very beginning of the story? It said, "Someone is going to go missing tonight." And her sister never came home. Now, what I do want to say is that Caitlin did not elaborate any further on whether her sister ever did come home, or whether something happened to her sister, or if she spoke to her little brother. I did email Caitlin back. That's not her real name, but I did email her back, and you would think that I would remember to ask her that very important detail, the most important detail of the story, but I did not remember because my brain is scrambled. So Caitlin, if you are watching this, please email me back and tell me if your sister's okay, because that's insane. But what the hell do you guys think happened here? Do you think that this was a mimic? Because she did see it. It was a black figure, so we don't know if it had a face or not. And I do know that a lot of times mimics aren't supposed to have faces. I don't know. I also know that demons can also mimic voices, so maybe it was that. But whatever it was terrifying. And what was the scariest part to you guys? Because the scariest part to me by far was this thing coming up the stairs and switching voices into different family members' voices. Can you imagine that? I want you to sit back and imagine that for a second. You're seeing this thing super tall, bending in different ways, walking up your stairs, getting closer to you, and it's changing voices of your family members calling your name. Imagine it changing voices over and over and over again as it's coming towards you. Oh, that was one of the crazier mimic stories I've ever gotten, if not the craziest. I just got a one that was really crazy recently, excuse me, but this one was pretty wild. That was pretty elaborate. A lot of stuff happened there. She saw it. She heard it several different times. It did several different things. It took several different, forms of, I guess not forms like physically, but auditorily. Drop all your thoughts, opinions, suggestions down in the comments. I promise I will reply to them.
Clothing can actually be haunted. This story takes place in the panhandle of Texas. There was this older gentleman who one day went to a thrift store, and he stumbles upon this old soldier's jacket, that looks like it's from the Civil War. And he says, "Whoa, this is amazing." Okay. So he takes this jacket and he buys it and he brings it home and he hangs it up in his bedroom on this, mannequin that he has. So one night he, was laying in bed and he looks over to where the Civil War jacket on the mannequin is, except it's not there. And he's thinking, where did my jacket and my mannequin go? And so he looks around his whole entire house. It's nowhere to be found. The next morning, he wakes up and it's back in his bedroom in the same place where it was before. About 2 weeks later after this, nighttime again, he's laying in his bed once again, can't sleep. When all of a sudden, his room just gets really bright and he sees these things start to focus in. There are 3 Native Americans in his room and they're just standing there looking at him menacing, and they start going closer and closer to him, and then boom, they just vanish. And so this happens a couple more times. He sees these Native American men in his room and they just vanish. So he thinks, what's up with this jacket? Like, ever since I brought this jacket home, all this weird stuff has been happening. So he takes this jacket to a historian because he thinks maybe this jacket is, has some history to it. And so he takes it to this historian, and the historian says this jacket was worn by a famous Civil War general who, after the Civil War, he fought in like a bunch of different engagements with Native Americans, and, squashed these several uprisings, as they called them at the time, but really, who knows what had happened. But anyways, this jacket was connected to this general who was connected with all of these, all this history. And so he says, wait a second, this jacket is what's, bringing about these spirits. So he ends up donating the jacket to a museum. And from time to time, the museum says at night they see figures of what look like Native American men walking around the museum. This next story comes out of Kansas, Lawrence, Kansas. There is a farmer. And one day he's out in his fields and, he's doing some work when he stumbles upon these pair of pants. And these pants look, very old, like, something from the 1800s. And he thinks, oh, this is interesting. Like maybe when I was tilling the soil or something, like I dug up these pants because they were all kind of muddy and dirty. So he takes these pants back to his house and cleans them up and stuff. And, so he goes, eats supper and all that. It starts getting dark. And in the middle of the night, he looks outside the window and he sees those pants. They are running across his bean field. There's no person in it, no body, but the pants are running by themselves across this bean field. And so he gets out of his house and he, runs after these pants that are just like walking away. And as soon as he gets close, they just fall to the ground back in the field. And so he says, you know what, I'm not bringing those in my house. Like, this is weird. I'm just going to leave them there. And the next night, once again, he sees these pants just walking around the bean field. And, several nights passed where he'd seen that. And then one day the pants were just gone. And the neighbors in the town, said as well, they would see these pants walking around by themselves with no body in it. You have to understand that when you go into the Appalachian Mountains, you are entering into another realm. And there is a set of unspoken rules that you must follow. Rule number 1, if you hear something calling your name, right, you didn't. There is nothing there. And you should not respond. Do not say hello. Do not say, who is it? Just run away. Because something is trying to gain permission. And by you acknowledging it, you are allowing it to come after you. If you hear screams in the mountains, right, you didn't. And do not go towards the direction of the screams to try and help. Because once again, something is trying to lure you. If you see people, you don't. If you hear crying, you're not hearing it. Do not respond to this at all because you are giving permission to whatever is in those woods to come after you. Now, if you are to go camping in the Appalachian Mountains, right, you have to remember, at night, you must keep a fire going at all times. And it's not for warmth, it's not for cooking, it's to keep you safe. And if you are going to camp in a tent, make sure when you go into that tent, it is sealed up. There are no holes, there are no cracks. And if you hear any kind of screaming, yelling, or anyone calling your name, do not respond. Do not go to sleep. And if something wakes you up, stay alert, and once again, do not respond. Now, it's very important when you are walking through the Appalachian Mountains, if you come across a deer carcass, do not touch it, do not stare at it, walk away, ignore it, because this is something, once again, trying to lure you into the woods. Now, if it comes to the point that something is chasing you, and it gets you, and there is no escape, fight as hard as you can, whether it's a person, an animal. If it's something else though, and you know what I'm talking about, well, you just let it get you, right? Because at that point, there's nothing you can do. And there's an old saying, you go into the Appalachian Mountains with 2 bullets, right? You fire the first one at something that isn't a person, that isn't an animal. And if it doesn't run away, you know what to do with the second one.
One afternoon in March of 2004, a 53-year-old handyman named Carl Fenwick sat on the floor of a vacant studio apartment in the rundown apartment building where he lived and worked in northern England. The apartment building was called The Cliff, and it was across the street from the ocean in the coastal town of Seaton Carew. Carl was in the middle of painting the apartment and getting it ready for a new tenant. but he had stopped to eat some lunch and to read a few chapters of one of his favorite spy novels. Carl loved spy novels, and he had a few that he just read over and over again. But as he turned the page, something out the window caught his eye. It was his landlady, Anne Darwin, who lived in a big Victorian house right next door. And at this moment, she was standing in front of her house with her 2 adult sons, Anthony and Mark, and they were all dressed in black and each were holding a wreath made of flowers. And now, Carl felt a little bit like a spy himself, as he secretly watched the family of 3 walk across the street together to this grassy knoll that looked out over the water. Anne and her sons bowed their heads, and Carl could tell they were very likely praying, and then all 3 of them tossed their wreaths into the ocean. Carl knew that Anne and her sons were honoring Anne's husband, John Darwin, who had actually died in a kayaking accident 2 years ago, basically in the water right out in front of their house. Carl could also see that Anne was visibly shaking, so he knew she must be crying. And when he saw that, Carl himself started to feel sad, because Carl cared deeply for Anne. He was not just her handyman and tenant. They had been secretly romantically involved ever since he had moved into the cliff almost 2 years ago. But Carl had actually known Anne for most of his life and had been in love with her for decades. So Carl and Anne were both from a town that was near Seton Carew, and Carl had first seen Anne on the school bus in high school, but he hadn't worked up the courage to say hello. Then soon after that, he left to go to college, but he had never stopped thinking about her. After college, Carl had started a family of his own and became a school teacher. But he lost everything after making some really bad real estate investments a few years ago. And his financial troubles had led to legal trouble, and finally he'd left his family and gone on the run from the police, living in the woods outside of Seton Carew. That's when he and Anne had found their way back to each other. One night, in a parking lot near his campsite, Carl saw Anne pull in her car, looking very upset. And this time, he did approach her. It turned out that Anne's husband had only just had his kayaking accident a few weeks earlier, and she was obviously in a very bad place emotionally because of it. She was also desperate for help around the properties that she and her husband had owned together. So that same night, she actually let Carl move into the cliff. And once Carl moved in, he and Anne began a somewhat unconventional romance. Carl would spend his days working to fix up the apartments inside the cliff, and then he would spend his nights with Anne in her house. It was weird for both of them to keep their relationship secret, but they both had their reasons. For Carl, he was just afraid of being arrested if anybody knew where he was. He was on the run. And for Anne, she felt like her family and friends expected her to be a grieving widow basically forever. So she didn't want to look like she basically immediately moved on from her dead husband. Now, at some point, the two of them hoped that Anne could sell her properties and that they could move far away together and start over. But they both knew that was easier said than done, because Carl would first have to figure out a way to leave the country without getting arrested. Now, Carl watched as Anne and her sons made their way back across the street, and he went back to reading his spy novel. And as he read the story, he made mental notes about the plot line and the main character, because Carl was actually working on a plan that maybe would allow him and Anne to start their new life together. He was actually using all of these spy novels basically as inspiration for this plan. He actually smiled to himself as he thought about how brilliant he was being. And he pictured, that someday in the future, an author would likely write a spy novel about him. It would take another 2 years for Carl to finally work out his plan. But finally, one morning in July of 2006, he was ready to put it all into action. On this morning, he walked through the airport near Seton Carew, trying to act casual as he approached the ticketing counter. He handed his passport to the gate agent and then glanced over his shoulder, looking back to where Anne was. She was standing at the back of the line. She met his eyes, but then quickly sort of looked away because they had agreed to pretend they didn't know each other. When Carl turned back around, he saw the ticketing agent was now staring intently at his passport, and he felt his heart rate begin to pick up. So this passport that Carl was using was a fake. He had created a new identity for himself using the birth and death records of a baby that had been born in the same year as him, which was an idea from the spy novel The Day of the Jackal, about an assassin who constantly changes identities. And if it worked, he and Anne would be able to travel to Panama in Central America. Carl's plan was he was going to stay there permanently if he got to Panama. and he hoped that Anne would love it enough that she would eventually move there too. Carl had read a brochure on Panama that called it a place for schemers, dreamers, and nutcases, which already made him feel right at home. Plus, the country was really cheap compared to the UK and far away from anyone who knew them, so he thought this was like the perfect place for them to move to. But all of that depended on this fake passport being convincing enough that the ticketing agent didn't say anything. And finally, after what felt like a very long time, the agent looked up from the passport and smiled and handed it back to Carl along with his ticket. Carl had to physically stop himself from literally sighing with relief when this happened. And instead, he just, as casually as he could, thanked the agent. And as he walked off, he turned and he sort of winked at Anne, who was still in line. After decades of reading about international spies, Carl kind of felt like one himself. And he liked this feeling a lot. And soon, he would be living permanently as John Jones, an international man of mystery. A few days later, Carl sat beside Anne in the back of a Jeep as a real estate agent drove them through the Panamanian countryside. They sped along the highway into the jungle, and as they did, Carl felt more alive than he had in years. They came around a bend in the road, and suddenly they were driving along a sandy beach, and the realtor pulled over and said to get out and take a look and see if this plot of land felt like it could be their new home. So Carl figured that once Anne sold the cliff apartment building that she owned and combined that money with the money Anne had inherited from her husband's life insurance policies, they'd have around 600,000 pounds in savings, which was around 800,000 American dollars. Now that was more than enough money to get set up, but they were going to need some kind of income in Panama as well. And Carl wanted to buy this land in particular in the jungle and use it to open up an eco-lodge resort. Eco-lodges were becoming really popular in Central America, and tourists paid a lot of money to stay in beachside cabins for a week and go canoeing and horseback riding and jungle trekking. Carl also wanted to build a villa on the property for just him and Anne, right there on the beach. So he led Anne down to the edge of the water and pointed to the tree line on the other side of the bay, and he told her to imagine a row of cabins and a dock for a bunch of canoes and a path that led to a horse stable. And then he pointed to the opposite side of the bay and told her to imagine a beautiful seaside villa where the two of them would live. Anne kicked off her sandals and walked into the water, and Carl could tell that she was picturing what their lives might look like here. To Carl, it was like years of careful planning were finally paying off. I mean, this had been like the best week of his relationship with Anne ever. They had finally been able to act like a normal couple for the first time. They had gone out in public to dinner every night together and walked down the street holding hands. Carl loved living as John Jones. He felt free. And weirdly enough, despite the fact that his identity was fake, he felt like his old self again, the way he used to feel before he got tangled up with all of his debt. By the time they got back to the realtor's office that afternoon, Anne said that she was completely taken with Panama and that, yes, she did want to move here with Carl, and that when she got back to England, she would get her affairs in order and get ready for this big move. Carl beamed, and their realtor grabbed a camera and took a picture of the three of them to commemorate the moment that they had decided to change their lives forever. It took another full year for Anne to sell her properties in Seaton Carew and to tell her family that she was moving to Panama, of all places.
Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
They'd all been shocked at first, but eventually they started to understand that she really needed to get away from England and all the unhappy memories of her old life. Shortly afterwards, Carl bought a condominium in Panama City so that he and Anne would have a place to live while they built their resort. And then finally, on October 22nd, 2007, Anne moved to Panama permanently. However, when Carl picked her up at the airport that night and drove her to their new home, he had to fake a smile because he had recently discovered some news that was going to throw their new life into jeopardy. And so he gave Anne a quick tour of the penthouse apartment, and then he asked her to take a seat at the kitchen table. And immediately, Anne sensed something was off and looked very worried. Carl took a deep breath, and then he told Anne that he was really excited to build their resort together. But there was one last unexpected obstacle standing in the way of their dreams. He said he had only learned about this obstacle a few weeks ago, and he had been waiting for the right moment for them to talk about it. He had just found out that the Panamanian government had instituted new procedures for anyone moving to Panama from another country. And now, English citizens needed to present a certificate of good conduct from the British police. to prove they had no criminal record. Now, this was no problem for Anne, but it was a huge problem for Carl, because he was living in Panama as John Jones. So if the police looked into his identity, they would quickly learn that John Jones was a fake identity. Anne put her head in her hands and just said, "What are we going to do?" And Carl said he didn't have an answer yet, but he promised he would figure something out. The next morning, Carl walked with Anne as they window shopped on a busy street in Panama City. And Carl thought about ways that he could get around this awful new procedure. He didn't want to live in this country illegally because he was done hiding. I mean, the whole point of coming here to Panama was so that he and Anne could live together out in the open. He followed Anne into an old vintage shop so that she could look at furniture. And as he wandered around the shop, he came across a bookshelf full of old books, including a few spy novels. Now, all the books were in Spanish, so he couldn't understand any of them, but he still picked one up and began flipping through it, hoping that maybe it would inspire him. And as he did this, he did feel inspired, but it was not by this book. He remembered the plotline of a different spy novel that he had read over a decade earlier. Even when he had been reading the novel at the time, he had thought that that plotline was too crazy to work in real life. But as they walked around that afternoon, Carl kept coming back to that idea, that plotline, and started to see how he might be able to make that work. Finally, at dinner that night, Carl told Anne that he was pretty sure he knew how to solve their visa problem once and for all. He warned her that the idea was risky, but he was confident that he could pull it off. 6 weeks later, on the afternoon of Sunday, December 2nd, 2007, Carl was back in the United Kingdom, wandering around the West End of London. He did his best to look very confused as he walked through Christmas displays and waited until a store clerk came over to ask if he was okay. And Carl gave her a sort of shy smile and then asked, "Why are all the Christmas decorations up?" And when she said it was December, it's Christmas, that's why, he pretended to be confused about what day it was and where he was. And then he asked the clerk for some help. And just like he had hoped, the store clerk frowned with concern and then escorted him into the nearest police station. And she told the officer at the front desk that something was really wrong with this guy. The officer smiled at Carl and asked what the problem was. And now Carl knew that for his plan to work, he was going to have to give an award-winning acting performance here. And so he kind of scratched at his head and then told the officer that he had lost his whole family. The officer sat up and asked for his name. And for the first time in 2 years, Carl didn't say John Jones. Instead, he gave the officer his real name. Because Carl had realized that the only way to truly feel like his old self in Panama was to actually become his old self and reclaim the old identity that he had left behind. But to reclaim this identity without also reclaiming all his old debt and legal problems was going to require one more huge lie. So Carl explained to the police officer that he knew his name, but nothing else about himself, because he said he had amnesia. The officer just stared at Carl, obviously dumbfounded. Then he turned and called for his supervisor. From this moment onward, things moved fast, but not in the direction that Carl or anyone else had expected. Carl had believed that if he just claimed he had amnesia, it'd be like wiping the slate clean in England. He could just resume his old name and his old life and make a plan to pay back his creditors now that he was in a better financial situation with the Eco Lodge. And he'd be able to get a real passport with his real name and live happily and truly openly in Panama. But this was not what happened, because almost immediately, newspapers caught wind of Carl's story, and it made the front page. Because to the rest of the world, Carl had this incredible story. He had supposedly spent years wandering around as a homeless person, never knowing his true identity. And so almost overnight, Carl became big-time international news. The entire world wanted to know, where had he been the past few years? Now, Carl had not expected any of this publicity. So he and Anne were both horrified when 2 days later, a British newspaper published a photograph from an obscure real estate website. And in this picture, Carl can be seen standing with Anne and their realtor and beaming with happiness after a day of viewing properties in Panama. And this photograph was very, very bad for Carl because it proved that he had not been wandering around homeless with amnesia in the UK like he had said to police. But this photo was really bad, really the worst for Anne, because it proved something more shocking and more terrible than regular old financial fraud. This photo revealed a story so outlandish that it sounds like it must have come directly out of a fictional spy novel, because it would turn out Anne was not the grieving widow she pretended to be, and her handyman boyfriend, Carl Fenwick, was not Carl Fenwick. Carl's real name, the one he had given that police officer in the UK when he pretended to have amnesia, was John Darwin. He was Anne Darwin's dead husband. He and Anne had faked his death in that kayaking accident to escape his debt, and so that he and Anne could claim life insurance money. Not even their own kids knew that their father was still alive. Only Anne and obviously John did. John and Anne were both soon arrested for fraud and wound up serving more than 3 years in prison. John's very unhappy ending does, in some ways, mirror the ending of the very book, The Day of the Jackal, which he used for inspiration. In that book, the assassin does lots of impressive things to change his identity, but in the end, he still gets caught.
These are a list of reasons that you're with the wrong person spiritually. Number 1, you encounter a long string of bad luck. But I mean, like, everything in your life is just going wrong ever since you got with this person. That is your literal guides trying to warn you and tell you, like, hey, you're headed in the wrong direction. That's not where your life is meant to be. If your bad luck continues, it's time to cut that off. Number 2, any future plans with this person will literally make you feel like you have a knot at the pit of your stomach. Your body will literally tell you everything that you need to know if you just listen. I actually was engaged to someone at one point where just the thought of like planning a wedding and all of that like just made my head spin. Like I couldn't wrap my head around it. And that was my literal like soul, like my whole being telling me that I was making the wrong choice. So listen. Number 3, you feel distracted and less motivated to fulfill your goals. If ever since this person came into your life, you've noticed that you have stopped working for the things that you were once like very passionate about. Definitely shows that you're emotionally off. When it is a spiritual, like a genuine spiritual connection, it's going to bring you inner peace and closer to like where you want to be. Number 4, it literally will show in your face. Like physically, it's gonna start to show. Like your glow will diminish. The light in your eyes will literally be dimmed. That's when you know that you're not making the right choice. And along with that, they diminish or belittle anything good that happens to you. Any successes that you have, they get irritated or they want to change the subject, or they're just genuinely not happy for you because they're just not happy with themselves. But spiritually, those are a few signs that it's time for you to run.
To tell you this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, scary stories, or paranormal encounters that you'd like to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. This happened when I was about 12 years old, and to this day, I still don't have a real explanation for it. It started off as a completely normal day. We were throwing a birthday party for my nephew at my parents' house. The yard was full of people. Family talking, kids running around, music playing. We even had one of those big inflatable bounce houses set up outside. Everything felt loud and busy, but safe. I spent most of the day outside helping my family, passing out food, checking on the kids, just going back and forth. Nothing was wrong. But at some point, I realized that something was wrong because something felt off. It was subtle, but I noticed that I couldn't find any of my cousins. That didn't make any sense because they had been around all day. So I went inside to look for them. The house felt quieter than it should have. Like the noise from outside wasn't reaching in the same way. I walked down the hallway toward my room, and that's when I saw it. The door was closed, and there was this dim flickering light coming from underneath it. I opened the door and immediately felt like something was wrong. The air in the room felt different, very heavy. Like I had just walked into something that I wasn't supposed to be seeing. My cousins were sitting in a circle on the floor. The lights were dimmed, and they were saying things I couldn't exactly understand. Whispering, almost chanting. I didn't hesitate. I flipped the light on, and everything stopped. They all looked at me at once, and then quickly they crumpled something up and tossed it behind them. I asked them what they were doing. They brushed it off and tried to laugh, said it was nothing, but the feeling in that room didn't go away. It stuck to me, like I had interrupted something, and whatever it was hadn't fully left. I walked closer and told them to show me what they were hiding, and they refused. They started messing around, pushing each other, trying to keep it away from me, but I grabbed it, and I wish that I hadn't. It was a piece of paper, and drawn on it was a Ouija board. They told me they were just playing around and that it wasn't real, that nothing could actually happen, but something about it just didn't sit right with me, not after how that room felt when I had walked in. I told my mom. She doesn't play around with stuff like that, and she immediately told them to go back outside. And just like that, my room was empty again, but it didn't feel empty. I remember standing there alone and feeling it. That unmistakable feeling that someone was watching you, even though there was no one there. Later that night, after the party ended and everyone went home, I went back into my room and I tried to distract myself. I started going through pictures I had taken during the party, scrolling through them one by one. All normal photos, family, cousins, everyone smiling and laughing. And then I saw it. In one of those pictures, behind two of my cousins, the ones who had made the board, there was a shadow. At first, I thought it was just lighting, but it didn't match, because I could see their actual shadows too. This was different, darker, almost shaped, like something standing behind them, watching. I stared at it for way too long, trying to make sense of what it was. But eventually, I convinced myself that it was nothing. I had to, because I still had to sleep in that room. That night, I asked my parents to leave their bedroom door open. From my bed, I could see straight into their room, and they agreed. We even left the bathroom door cracked with the light on, just enough so that I wouldn't be completely in the dark. But even with that, I couldn't relax. The room still felt wrong, like whatever had been there earlier hadn't left. I laid there, staring into the dim light, trying to fall asleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. At some point, I must have drifted off, but what happened next felt too real to just be a dream. I felt the bed shift, like something had climbed onto it, right on top of me. Before I could even react, something was there, pressing down on me, pinning me. I opened my eyes, and I saw it. A dark shape, not solid, but not invisible either, like a cloud of darkness hovering over me. But I could still see through it. I tried to move, but I couldn't. My arms were pinned down, held tight against the bed. My legs started kicking on their own. I could see them thrashing, trying to fight it off. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. Not one sound, just silence. Panic hit me all at once, kicking, twisting, trying to break free, and then somehow I got one arm loose and then the other. I pushed with everything I had and kicked the blanket off of me. And the second it hit the floor, there was a loud thud, like something heavy had just been thrown down with it. At that exact moment, I could scream again, and I did. My parents came running into the room. They had heard the noise too, and they thought I had fallen off of the bed. But when they turned on the light, there was nothing there. Nothing on the floor, nothing in the room, just me, terrified. I told them everything, and that night my mom stayed in the room with me, and I barely slept. The next morning, I refused to keep that blanket. I made my mom throw it away, and I didn't care if I sounded crazy. I didn't want it in the house anymore. That same day, my grandma had come into town, and when she heard what happened, she went straight into my room and blessed it. After that, the air felt different, lighter, like whatever had been there was finally gone. And nothing like that ever happened again. But I still think about it, because I don't know if we brought something in that night, or if something had been waiting for us to open the door.
Here are my top 3 most creepy and astonishing ghost photos that were captured during paranormal investigations that I helped lead this past year in 2025. And there's been quite a few that I helped lead in Texas and New York and even here in Los Angeles. Now, before those investigations occur, I always encourage those who participate to take as many photos as they can, along with video footage, because you never know. Once in a while, we do capture something that we fully can't explain. So let's rip this haunted band-aid and let's look at the first one. Coming in as the top contender. Now, this picture was taken the first night of our paranormal investigation of Old Town Spring during the Dinner with the Dead event in the former home goods store of Fads. Now, this picture was taken by my paranormal bestie, Roberto. Robert, you know who you are. Now, a bit of the background of the history and the haunted history of Fads is that Fads used to be a group of Sears Craftsman homes that were relocated in the early 1900s in Old Town Spring. You see, there was a husband and wife that used to live in one of the homes, and it is said that the husband had unalived his wife, and it is said that it is her spirit that is connected to those Craftsman homes. And then obviously, number 2, an oldie but a goodie. In December of 2025, I led a public investigation over at the Memory Park by the San Fernando Mission, and surrounding legends that pretty much covered this entire property was that of the woman in white. This was taken around 10:15 at night. I had sent a group further out into this location to start taking photos. Now, many people said that it was Photoshop, which, I mean, for all of us who were there, we saw this group taking photos, especially the gentleman that took this photo in real time. Like, if you have Photoshop on your phone, you know how long it takes just to open the app, log in, and start putting in those layers. It's a pain. Now, he showed me his phone. He showed me the apps on his phone, nothing out of the ordinary, but I thought that it was a really, really good catch. This one is interesting. This one was captured in Lilydale. This was captured by our friend, the haunted therapist. I'm going to tag her down below. This was an investigation that was led also by Tawny Lewis. We were in the woods and we were told of certain activity in this woods. There are also elementals. Now, we were here by the inspiration stump. I promise you that whatever or whoever this is was definitely not a part of the group. Looks like there's like 3 faces, like 1, 2, and 3. It looks very disturbing. But these photos were genuinely taken, and these were images that were captured. So let me know in the comments if you captured anything strange and unusual during your paranormal investigations, and always remember to stay haunted and weird, friends.
We listen, we don't get scared, and we don't judge. Let me tell you guys a story time of when this grandma had dementia, and she went to somebody's house naked, and they caught her in the morning, and she was confused and all of that, and they burnt her because they said she was a witch. So guys, back in the days, this is a story that I was told by my grandmother. Back in the days, dementia, schizophrenia, all of those things were deemed as somebody that's mentally ill, and they would take you to traditional healers so that they can fix you, instead of actually like looking at the real problem and taking these people to medical doctors. They did not believe in those things. So at this time, my grandma was in her late 30s, and she's like, this grandmother that we are talking about in the story was her friend's aunt, but then she was old. So my grandmother is like, so as the grandma got older and older, the sickness got progressively worse, because she started forgetting that she lives with these people, and these people that she stays with are her family, because sometimes apparently like she would wake up in her room and start screaming that she's being kidnapped and that she doesn't know where she is. She wants to go home, and she would say she wants to go home and go back to a house that they don't know about, and she would like, I want to go back to my parents. Sometimes she behaved like a child, and obviously they thought somebody's like practicing witchcraft on her because they did not understand these mental illnesses. So one day she woke up in the middle of the night, guys, and she opened the door, right, and she went out. And fortunately, somebody who stayed in the area found her, but she was fully clothed this time, found her, and the person took her back home, right? Took her back to the people whom she stayed with. And obviously he or she knocked on the door, told him that she found this person outside, and again they spent money on traditional healers, guys, and nothing was happening. And also she was not taking any medication for whatever illness that she had, so obviously it was getting worse and worse. They started locking the doors, they started locking the gates, and they started praying heavily or whatever, instead of taking this person to a doctor. Because my grandmother is like, there was a person that advised them like to take this person to a doctor, these things happen, because that person that was advising them worked for the white people. in that time. She knew that these diseases are a thing, you know, just take her to the doctor, they probably will give her medication, she will be better. The family refused, because why? They did not want to anything that had that was connecting them to the white man because of colonization and all of that. Unfortunately for them, this time they were unlucky, because baby girl woke up stripped naked, opened the door. I don't know how they did not hear her opening the door. Opened the door, opened the gate, went to the not the neighbors. She went, I think, 2 streets away from where she stayed. And when she got there, she sat, guys. She didn't say anything. She didn't move, nothing. And guess what? In the morning, people found her there naked. And obviously, they you know how black people say a witch, when you see a witch at night, or you found them at your house, and your house is strong spiritually, they will get caught and they will freeze, they will be unable to move. Baby girl was unable to move because she was really cold, because it was at night when she left, and also she was not wearing anything, like she was naked like this. So, you know, people made their own thing and are like, you are a witch. And they called the neighbors, they called the people from the neighborhood, and the people came, guys, and apparently they beat her. They beat her and kept on asking her, how did you get here? Who sent you here? And she was like, nobody sent me here. Yo, guys, it was very sad, because obviously the family members of that lady, like my grandmother's friend, they say they were asleep and somebody came and called them and said, hey, your grandma's getting beat on so-and-so street because they're saying that she's a witch. People were like, what? They got up. My grandma's like, she was also there. She says they all got up and they went. When they got there, they are beating this lady up. Obviously, the people, her kids, the lady's kids, are pleading. Even like my grandma's friend, are pleading with these people, like, no, like something is wrong with her. We don't know what it is. And they were like, no, your mother is a witch. If you don't want us to beat you guys as well, you better move. They're asking her questions and she's unable to speak. And obviously they are deeming it as you're a witch and you have been caught. That's why you can't speak. That's why you can't move. That's why you can't XYZ. When I tell you, after they beat her, guys, they put a tie on her and they burnt her to death. And after they burnt her, they were like, the people of the community told the family members, take your grandma, isn't it? After, like, they waited for her to burn to ashes. She was screaming. According to my grandma, she was screaming, guys. She was screaming in agony and pain. Imagine watching your grandmother being burnt alive, all in the name of calling her a witch, only because she had dementia. Yo! And obviously the people picked up the ashes. They, you know, organized the funeral for her. And the same people that burned the grandma to ashes didn't come. Nobody in the community came. It's only family, close friends and family and people from the community that were actually in support. But nobody came to the funeral because obviously they say that is a witch's funeral. And also, from that day on, guys, people never associated themselves with my grandma's friends, family, and her. You know, not my grandma, but the friend, my grandma's friend. They never associated themselves with them because people were like, this family is filled with witches. We caught them, and that's what it is, period. And, y'all, and it got so bad because the family was obviously ill-treating the community was ill-treating them. And also, like, there were little kids there. They were not allowed to play with other kids because they were deemed as witches. You know, next thing they play with these kids and they eat something that they were given from the other kid, and then the kid faints on their own. They're gonna blame them. You know, it was just sad. They eventually had to move. And I remember a couple of days, not me, but my grandma was like, a couple of days after the funeral, there was the grandma who had died, right? The daughter came forward and was like, I told you guys to take mom to hospital and take her to the doctor because she couldn't herself because she worked far and these people did not listen. And she's like, look at where we are now. You know, this person had dementia. He had taken her grandmother to the clinic and the doctor told him that this grandma has dementia and it's only going to get worse and she needs to take her medication just so she can get better. But they did not listen. They did not listen. And when I tell you, that daughter never also spoke to the family ever again because she blamed them low-key because she was like, you see, you guys decided to go the traditional route when I specifically told you to take this person to the hospital. Now look where we are. And I don't blame her, honestly. I really don't blame her because what do you mean you guys were told that this person has a medical condition and you still decided to take her to traditional doctors and traditional healers and all of that? No, man, no. But guys, honestly, the stereotype of finding a grandma at your house naked and all of that, and you think it's because of witchcraft, like, educate yourself. At this point, we are old, we are grown, we are in the new times now. We have social media, we have Google. You guys know that there is diseases out there. Hey.
Have you guys seen this being before? If you haven't, or if you have, please stick around, because I'm about to tell you the most scary encounter that I've had with this in my life, actually, was with this being right there, is what you're seeing. Some of us call it the Green Reaper. Some of us call him the devil himself. For me, I don't have a name for it, but I knew what I saw was exactly that. And let me tell you how. So, it happened in Haiti again. Yes, in Haiti, where I was born and grew up until I was I was still a baby when I left Haiti. Not too much experience that I could have had, but throughout that short period of time from being born and having the consciousness, to remember certain things, and up until I left in Haiti, that was enough for me. That was enough. So, I remember it was December 31st. Last day of that year, there was a lot of celebration. If New Year's Eve is a big celebration in Haiti. There's always drinking involved, parties involved, kids playing on the streets, we celebrating leaving the year behind, that we just made it alive. Very simple. And me and the crew in the neighborhood was just playing around. And I remember I just wanted to, before I go home, before our curfew hits, I wanted to grab some barbecue from, the streets next door or something. Barbecue was like a big thing in Haiti around that time. It was like some kind of like street food discovery or something. And every single night, literally, there was lights underneath this person's house, and they grilling chicken, like chicken leg quarters with like they frying plantains, and then that's the food that you would eat at night. Everyone was saving their money to eat food, to eat barbecue at night. And then once curfew hits for the kids, all these kids, they went to bed, they went to their house, listened to the parents, and they actually followed the curfew. Me, I didn't. I wanted some barbecue so bad, but I didn't have any money. Fortunately for me, there was a cousin of ours who actually, she was living with us. She was like a big, like older sister, and she was living with us. But she was older to a point where, she was actually dating this guy who lived across the street from us. But my dad did not know, because my dad was so overly protective over the girls. The girls were not allowed to see no boys outside the house or nothing, nothing. It's school, come home, go to sleep. Same thing, school, come home, go to sleep for the girls. And I made it my business, the way I used to put money in my pocket and have extra change to actually get some food at night. It was a secret that I was meant to keep between, like her dating this guy, and then make sure that my dad doesn't know what she's doing when she's not around, when she's outside at night. I was always lying for her. Oh, she went down and see my aunt. She went down and see, like other cousins. She's at some other auntie's house or something. Always lying for her. And I remember that day, December 31st, that night come, and I was craving some barbecue, guys. That I decided I'm gonna knock on that dude's door, because I know exactly where she's at. I'm gonna ask for some money. So I went over there and I'm knocking, and then there he is. He came out. It's like, what do you want? I thought like you're supposed to keep a secret, do your part. I'm like, hey, listen, my part tonight is a little bit more expensive because it's the last day of the year, and I want some barbecue, and this is how much it costs. And then he went back inside, came back with $5, handed it to me. He's like, listen, she's gonna be here for a while, so make sure that you make sure that her dad does not know, or my dad does not know that she's in here. And then I went back inside. My dad's asking me where she's at. I'm like, oh, I just saw her walking down the street. She's playing with the girls outside, blah, blah. My dad bought the lie and, just like completely went to sleep. I snuck out of the house and I walked to the barbecue joint. And I remember exactly the route to take, to get to the barbecue joint. And I was so happy. I got my plate. I'm enjoying my food and I finished it. All right, good. Let's go back home before my dad wakes up and start looking for her Not only then it would become a problem for her, but it would become a problem for me. I'll get my ass whooping the next day as well. So I'm running to the house, and suddenly I found myself lost. I don't know how, but I did. But I didn't give up. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna keep finding my way home and okay, boom, there you go. Now, again, I felt like I was actually miles away from home now. Now I'm completely in shock. I'm scared. It's the last day of the year. I've heard stories of how kids go missing. People, grown-ups go missing, December 31st in Haiti, in the streets of Haiti. I just know that like I'm probably gonna be the next victim, and I'm trying to make it my way home. And it got so dark to where like, there's no lights, nothing to follow. And all of a sudden, I heard what seems to sound like horses galloping. And then like the more I keep hearing the sound, the louder it gets, meaning that they're getting a little closer to me. And then I took a really quick look. I try to stay focused. What I saw was two men. They're like hands on the floor, feet, like they walking like horses, coming towards me. And then in the back, this like tall being, but completely covered, had like this kind of like weapon, I don't know, like this long stick, in the left hand side, and then with the hook, almost like in a circle, almost touching like the wood, and then it's holding it, and it's like literally ripping these grown ass men with that wood, and telling them to keep moving, like he's swearing at them, calling them different names like animals, stuff like that, and then like threatening like he's gonna kill them if they don't move, and then they're crying and they're moving closer to me, which seems to be like a scene out of a freaking horror movie. Literally, I'm like in the streets, like froze like this, not moving, not knowing what to do, want to scream, but no little sound is coming out of my mouth. I'm just like stuck there. And then all I remembered was the way that I'm describing this being to you guys. Tall. I'm talking about terrifying, y'all. Something out of a freaking horror movie. And then it looked at me. It was like smirking, like laughing or something, like it got me. I knew it actually did. But next thing I remember was actually waking up, and I'm looking at my clothes covered in literally what seemed to be mud. My face was all muddy, and then I just like got up like nothing happened, and I'm looking down, and it looks like it's a this like muddy area, and apparently I fell into it. And there was a couple of people was asking me if I was okay, like what was this kid doing, like sleeping overnight, waking up in the morning in this mud. So I just got up. I didn't tell anybody, nothing. Suddenly I remembered the route back to my home. I got back home, and there's my cousin. She's not saying nothing. My parents are yelling at me. I don't know what to say. I'm completely shocked at myself. I didn't say nothing. All I remembered was my mom and my dad took turn into whooping my ass, trying to get me to say what the heck happened to me. How am I covered in mud? Where was I last night? I had no answers at all. It took me 2 days in order to tell my mom what happened to me. And I was grounded from going outside, play with these kids for like weeks. It turned to me, school, home, go to sleep for like 2 weeks straight. And in 2 weeks straight, at night, I would dream of the same being, literally while I'm sleeping on bed, standing on top of me and laughing the same way that I've actually witnessed it that night before. Yes, that was my experience. And that was scary. Experiencing, seeing this being right there for the very first time. It wasn't after me. It was actually carrying these two poor souls, dragging these two poor souls where they're supposed to go. And rest in peace to both of them.